Here is the recap of the first 12 seasons of American Horror Story.
Over the past few years, the Harmon family has had a lot of bad things happen, including Vivian's miscarriage and Ben's infidelity. So the heroes decide to move to another town and start over. The realtor shows the family a beautiful house, about which the locals have made creepy legends. It turns out that the previous owners died within the walls of the mansion, but it is this news that bribes their daughter Violet. In addition, the price of the mansion is significantly lower than other houses in the area, so the heroes decide to settle here. However, they do not suspect that the building is haunted. While Vivian is busy settling in, an uninvited guest, Constance, and her daughter come to her house. The girl scares the heroine with words about her imminent death. The strangeness of the locals does not end there, and soon Vivian meets an elderly woman, Moira. The stranger appears to her as a maid who, as it turned out, worked in this house under the previous owners. Vivian decides to hire her, thus surprising Ben because he sees her not as an old woman, but as a sexy housekeeper. Meanwhile, the head of the family arranges one of the rooms into a working office, where he receives his clients. So he gets a young guy named Tate. He has an obsessive mania to kill people, with which he tries to fight, but without success. Ben helps him to restore his mental health, but noticing that he has become friends with his daughter, he decides to stop psychotherapy sessions. A couple of days after the movie, Ben tries to get closer to his wife, but Vivian has not yet forgiven him for cheating, so they quarrel. In the end, the heroes do indulge in passion, and soon a man in a latex suit enters the bedroom. The heroine thinks that her husband thus wants to make a variety in their intimate life, so without a backward thought, gives in to the impulse. A short time later, Vivian learns that she is pregnant. The next day, Ben gets a call from his lover, Hayden, asking him to come to Boston to help her with the abortion. Realizing that he can't tell his wife the truth, Ben lies to Vivian about the difficult patient and leaves. At this time, the house is infiltrated by several people who want to repeat the bloody murder that took place within the walls of the mansion decades ago. Tate, along with the ghosts of the house, helps Vivian and Violet escape and kills the criminals. After what happened, Vivian wants to sell the house, but in order to dispel the creepy legends about the mansion and attract buyers, the heroine decides to delve into the history of the house and go on a tour. It turns out that the first owners were Dr. Charles and his wife, Nora. At some point, they stopped having enough money. Then the woman took the situation into her own hands and found an illegal way to earn money. She would find pregnant girls who wanted to get rid of their babies. Charles gave them what they wanted, and all was well until one of the patients blabbed to her boyfriend. After learning of the baby's death, the man decided to steal Charles and Nora's baby. But despite the expectations of the inconsolable parents, he never demanded a ransom. The kidnapper dismembered the baby, and his remains were brought to the parents by police officers for identification. Meanwhile, Tate takes Violet to the basement and tells her about the monster that lives in the place. It turns out that the first owner of the house, Charles, could not accept the death of the child and collected him in pieces, sewing him animal body parts. But the wife did not appreciate his work because the child fed on blood. As a result, Nora shot her husband in the head and then committed suicide. While Vivian was on a tour, Hayden came to Ben's house. It turns out that the girl did not have an abortion and from now on is ready to do anything to keep Ben with her. Hoping to talk in a more private place, the heroes arrange a meeting. But at the appointed time, Ben does not come. So furious, Hayden once again breaks into his house. She wants to tell Vivian about everything. But then Larry, who was one of the former owners of the mansion, comes to her aid. He kills Hayden and buries her body in the ground, where Moira's corpse already lies. Larry tells the hero that he took care of his lover. And to hide the evidence, Ben has to put a gazebo at the burial site. To sell a house that everyone in the neighborhood thinks is cursed, the family hires interior designers. Soon, Chad and Patrick come to visit them. In fact, they are also ghosts who were killed in the past by a mysterious man in latex. But Vivian and Ben don't know this yet. Soon, the couple is sent to the hospital for an ultrasound. It turns out that the child of the heroes is much larger than it should be at her gestational age. In addition, on the monitor of the device, the midwife sees something terrible and faints. On Halloween, Tate asks Violet out on a date, and the couple goes to the beach, where they are found by several bloody teenagers who blame Tate for their deaths. The girl doesn't pay much attention to their appearance because it's Halloween, and at this time, everyone dresses up as monsters. However, at some point she begins to think about their words and decides to check the story told by the guys from the beach. It turns out that many years ago, Tate shot over 10 high school students, after which the police killed him. That's how she finds out that her boyfriend is a ghost. Constance, who turns out to be Tate's mother, invites a psychic for Violet. She explains to the girl that Tate does not know about his death. Because of unfinished business in this world, he cannot pass to the afterlife, so he needs her support. Violet tries to process what she heard, but soon she begins to be tormented by other ghosts of the house. Unable to fight anymore, the heroine takes a vial of pills and falls asleep. However, she is found by Tate and brought to her senses. Meanwhile, Vivienne sees Hayden in the house and tells her about the pregnancy. When Hayden learns the truth, she decides to kill her lover's wife. But Ben shows up. He still does not realize that the house is haunted and thinks that Larry lied to him about Hayden's death. The situation forces him to confess to his wife that his lover was pregnant by him. In addition, it turns out that even after Vivienne found out about his infidelity, Ben and Hayden's affair did not end. A potential buyer, Joe, finally shows up and is interested in purchasing the spooky house. In addition, he likes Moira, who, as a maid, comes with the mansion. He, like the other men, sees her not as an old lady, but as an attractive young woman in a provocative uniform. It soon becomes clear that he does not intend to live in the house, but wants to tear it down for construction, which Constance learns about. The woman cannot allow this, because then all the ghosts of the house will be destroyed, and she will no longer see her son Tate. So Constance persuades Moira to help her. Despite the fact that many years ago, it was she who killed her with a shot in the head for jealousy of her husband, the ghost girl agrees to help her and kills the potential buyer. The truth about the man in black latex is finally revealed. It turns out that in the past, Chad wanted to rekindle the passion in his relationship with his husband, which is why he once bought the suit, which Tate soon used. He killed the couple and promised Nora, who was distraught over the loss of her baby, to get her a toddler, which is why he used Vivienne. Meanwhile, Hayden conspires with Nora to finally drive Vivienne crazy. The plan works, and Ben thinks his wife is insane, after which he has her committed to a mental institution. After some time, when Moira once again tried to seduce the hero, he finally had an insight and saw her in the form of an elderly lady. Soon, he learns from the doctor that Vivienne is pregnant with twins, and one of the babies is not conceived by him. Then he begins to figure out that everything his wife has said is true, which means that she is not crazy. Soon, Ben learns that Violet has not shown up at school for more than 2 weeks and decides to talk to his daughter. He thinks that the recent events have affected her psyche, so she has fallen into a depressive state and does not go anywhere. However, in fact, everything is more complicated. It turns out that Violet died that day when Tate tried to save her from an overdose. The news of her death was not easy for the girl, because now she is forever tied to this house. Soon, Ben learns that the man in latex is Tate and takes his wife away from the asylum. The couple return home for Violet to relocate together, but Vivienne goes into labor in the car, so she has to go into the mansion. There is no time to call an ambulance, so all the ghosts, including Dr. Charles and the nurses, deliver the heroine's baby. However, one of the babies dies and the second child is carried off by Constance. After giving birth to the babies, Vivienne loses a lot of blood and eventually dies. Violet realizes that the former owner of the house wants to take the baby away from her mother, so she tries to exorcise his spirit with the help of a ritual from a medium. However, the plan does not work, and instead, the girl learns the truth about Tate, who raped her mother. The girl says goodbye to her boyfriend, as she will never be able to forgive him. Meanwhile, Ben is left alone with a toddler, to whom he is not even a father. He calls for the help of his late wife's sister and packs his things to leave home. But at some point, he realizes that he can't live without his family. He tries to commit suicide, but Vivian's ghost appears and dissuades him. It would seem that she managed to convince her husband to leave the place with the baby. However, soon Ben is killed by Hayden, and the baby is stolen by Constance. After a while, a realtor shows the house to another family who, like the Harmons, decide to buy the mansion for its personality and low price. Vivian and Ben see all of this, so they decide to give them a brief tour of the haunted world on their first night to get them out of the house forever. Several years pass. Constance returns home where her son, to whom she is essentially a grandmother, is waiting for her. The woman finds the nanny on the floor with her throat slit, and the child sitting next to her. This is the end of first season.
The action unfolds in the insane asylum Briar Cliff, where a reporter, Lana, arrives. The girl asks the manager of the clinic, Sister Jude, to give her the opportunity to interview one of the patients. It turns out that for some time in the city was running a serial killer who killed women and skinned them. He was nicknamed Bloody Face and was sent to an asylum after his capture. Not wanting to publicize all the horrors that happened to people in the walls of the hospital, Jude refuses the annoying reporter, but she still finds a way to illegally enter the building. As a result of examining the cell, the girl is attacked, after which she comes to her senses and realizes that she has turned from a visitor into a patient. Meanwhile, a married couple who are concerned about their son's behavior come to the asylum for help. They are sure that something terrible is happening to him, and the only hope for salvation is faith and therapy. The clinic workers examine the young man and realize that the boy is possessed by a demon. When the exorcist tries to exorcise the dark powers, the demon moves into a nun named Mary, Jude's assistant. Meanwhile, a guy named Kit, whom everyone believes to be Bloody Face, meets Grace at the clinic. The girl believes in his innocence and assures him that she herself was in the clinic by mistake. Now Kit has two options. Either he will be recognized as mentally unhealthy and will spend the rest of his days in the asylum, or the psychiatrist will recognize him as sane, and then the court will sentence him to death in the electric chair. To determine Kit's fate, psychiatrist Oliver arrives at the clinic, who is also attracted to Lana's story. The man agrees to visit her girlfriend and send her a message, but the girl was not at home, which means that no one will help Lana. Grace and Kit want to escape and Lana is ready to help, but only on the condition that Bloody Face does not leave the hospital. She thwarts one rescue attempt because Grace wanted to leave with Kit, but the second time the reporter began to doubt the guy's guilt. In the end, the trio waited until all the patients and staff start watching the movie in the common room and tried to escape. The nymphomaniac girl agreed to distract the guard, but soon she is caught by a local Dr. Arden. He is disgusted by the very fact of her existence, so without remorse the man puts her monstrous experiments. At this time the trio manages to go outside, but near the clinic they are attacked by humanoid monsters, forcing the protagonists back into the building. A new patient appears at the clinic who introduces herself as Anne Frank. She believes herself to be the very martyr who managed to survive in German captivity. At the doctor's rounds, the girl recognizes Dr. Arden as a Nazi who performed horrible experiments on everyone who fell into his hands. Jude is interested in the girl's story because she has long disliked Arden and his methods of work. The woman decides to seek help from a private detective, hoping that he will be able to find out the truth. After a while, Anna is picked up by her husband, who dispels Jude's suspicions and takes the mentally unstable wife home. Before canceling her request to the detective, the woman goes to Arden's lab to check her hunches and find some clues. Except she had no idea that her assistant Mary had already removed all the evidence of Arden's guilt in the form of a mutilated nymphomaniac. Jude calls the detective to cancel her request, but ends up finding out that Anna was right. Arden was indeed a Nazi doctor who performed monstrous experiments on humans under the pretext of medical breakthroughs. Jude wants to share his suspicions with Monsignor, the director of the clinic, but he doesn't know yet that Arden is conducting experiments on living people with his consent. As a result, Jude is fired from the asylum. Meanwhile, Oliver helps Lana to escape and brings her to his house. After a while, the girl begins to realize that something is wrong with him, and soon her fears come true. It turns out that Oliver is actually the bloody face. The killer locks her in the basement along with the corpse of her girlfriend. Soon he receives a call from Kit, whom he tricked into making a tape recording of the confessions to those horrific murders. Kit demands that Oliver explain everything to the police. After all, because of that tape, he was taken to prison and now he is waiting for the death penalty. Enraged by Kit's rude behavior, Oliver returns to Lana and rapes her. After what happened, the killer realizes that he still has to deal with his captive. But the reporter manages to beat him and escape from imprisonment. She runs out on the highway and gets into the first car, but even here a man with an obvious mental disorder is behind the wheel. Eventually he shoots himself in the head, and the car is involved in an accident. When Lana wakes up, she realizes with horror that she is once again in an asylum. Kit talks to the investigator and realizes that he will not be able to avoid execution. Then he decides to escape and returns to the asylum to visit Grace. But in time for the lovers to meet, a monster from the forest appears and attacks them, and the guard sees Kit killing the creature. He ends up shooting the protagonist, but Grace covers him with her body and dies. Meanwhile, Arden comes to Jude and asks for her help in fighting the possessed Mary. The woman believes the doctor's words and, on his tip, falls into a trap. As it turns out, Mary instigated one of the patients to take revenge on Jude and locked the two of them in the same room. In an attempt to defend herself, the sister kills the patient and the Monsignor locks her in the asylum as a patient. The next day, Mary uses electroshock therapy on her former boss, after which the woman gradually begins to lose her mind. At this time, Arden tries to get rid of Grace's body, but a sudden flash of bright light, which Kit once told him about, blinds the man, and when he regains consciousness, Grace's body is gone. Arden suggests that Kit's version about aliens is possible, so, having analyzed past experiences, guesses that the appearance of an alien race is somehow related to the threat to Kit's life. He offers the guy to experimentally test his theory, but to do so he will have to kill him for a while. Kit agrees, and after the procedure asks if he got to know the truth. But in response, Arden lies to him about the absence of any changes. In fact, while the guy was dead, there was another flash of light in the next room, after which Grace, 9 months pregnant, appeared. Oliver learns that Lana is back in the asylum and visits her. He wants to kill her, but the girl has a trump card. It turns out that she is pregnant by him. The reporter decides to take advantage of her situation and with the help of Keith brings Oliver out into the open by taping his confession to the murders. Then she tries to induce a miscarriage with a hanger, but her plan fails and the pregnancy persists. Monsignor begins to guess that Mary is really inhabited by a demon, so he asks Jude for advice, who is sure that the only way to get rid of the devil is to kill Mary. Monsignor throws the girl down from the 3rd floor, and Dr. Arden, who has long had feelings for her, decides to burn with her in the cremation chamber. While Jude has not yet lost her mind, she asks one of the nuns to help Lana leave the clinic, and the woman agrees. She dresses the girl and leads her out of the building. Soon Lana visits Oliver's house and kills him, after which she takes the tape of his confession to the police and Kit is declared innocent. Lana begins to write books in which she describes her experiences in the asylum, and Kit begs the Monsignor to give him Grace's death certificate, thus letting her go home with him. The protagonists, along with the baby, return to Kit's house, where they want to start all over again. But there, as it turns out, lives his wife and child, who was once abducted by aliens. Kit with his wife, Grace and 2 toddlers live in the same house. Grace believes that the aliens who gave them the babies are sure to return because they are destined for a great mission. Except that Kit's wife is not waiting for this moment and with horror imagines the consequences. One day she attacks Grace with an axe, after which she falls into the hospital Briarcliff, where she soon dies. Sometime later, Kit meets Lana at the presentation of her next book. He doesn't understand why after all this time she still hasn't closed the asylum. As a result, the guy learns that she is not going to do anything. However, after a while, the woman does return to the treatment center with an exposing report and tries to find Jude, but instead finds records of a certain woman who was given into Kit's care. The woman meets up with a buddy and learns that after that conversation at the cafe, Kit took Jude into his home. He realized that in order to move on, he needed to accept his past and forgive this woman. He eventually brought her into his home and introduced her to his children as a nanny, and 6 months later she died. Sometime later, Kit got married again, but soon he got cancer and inexplicably disappeared right in his clinic room. 40 years pass. Lana has become a famous and rich elderly woman, to whom reporters came to record an exclusive for a TV program. During the interview, the protagonist talks about the Oliver child, whom she abandoned while still in the maternity hospital. For a long time, she worried that she gave the baby to strangers, but she could not raise a son from a brutal killer. A few years later, Lana wanted to see the child and met him on the playground. Since then, she never saw him again. From time to time, she wondered who the boy she abandoned 40 years ago had become. When the reporters and camera crew left, Lena's son showed up. It turns out that when he was young, he learned that she was his mother and Bloody Face was his biological father. Since then, he grew up hating Lana and admiring his deceased relative. Furthermore, he has begun to copy his crimes by killing everyone who enters the abandoned Briarcliff Asylum. The man pulls out a gun, hoping to kill Lana, but the woman shoots first. This is the end of the second season. In the 19th century lived Madame Lalaurie, who was known for her cruelty and torture of black slaves. She had a torture room in her attic, where she scalped them and turned one of her servants, who slept with her daughter, into a kind of minotaur. This continued for many years, but one day Madame Laveau knocked on her door. The stranger tricked the slave owner to drink the elixir, which eventually gave Laurie immortality. But the woman was not acting in good faith. It turns out that Lalaurie turned her beloved into an animal and abused him every day, so the offended woman decided to take revenge on her in a rather unusual way. As a result, together with the townspeople, Madame Laveau buried Lalaurie alive, thus condemning the immortal human to eternal suffering. In the present day, young Zoe decides to take advantage of her parents' absence and calls her boyfriend to her house. The lovers decide to get close, but right during carnal pleasures her boyfriend dies. So Zoe learns that she is a witch and will kill anyone who sleeps with her. So her worried mother sends her to a special academy for special girls under the patronage of Cordelia. Within the walls of the academy, Zoe meets 3 students: movie star Madison, Nan, and voodooist Queenie. Soon, together with the movie diva Zoe goes to a party where she meets Kyle. At the same time, his buddies drugged and raped Madison, and after the appearance of Kyle, they ran away. But boys can't get far because Madison turns their bus upside down with the help of magic and the White Eye. The instigator of the violence survives, but Zoe decides to use her gift and kills him right in the hospital. In gratitude for revenge, Madison offers Zoe to resurrect Kyle. And together the girls go to the morgue. They put the guy back together piece by piece, and after he awakens, they try to take him away with them. At this time, the witch Misty, who has a skill for raising the dead, shows up. She offers to look after Kyle for a while, and the girls agree. Meanwhile, Fiona, the mother of the head of the academy, Cordelia, is trying in vain to find a way to rejuvenate herself and regain her energy. She is a high witch who returns to the academy after many years of absence to help her daughter teach her students the basics of magic. Fiona takes her students on a tour of Madame Lalaurie's house, after which she learns from Nan that she can hear her voice. The High Witch secretly digs up the coffin and learns of her immortality, which she herself desires. Meanwhile, Cordelia dreams of having a child, but cannot get pregnant. Then the girl turns to Madame Lavie for help, but she refuses to do her a favor. It turns out that the clans of Fiona and Laveau have been feuding for many years, and after threats from Cordelia's mother, the witch refuses to help her. Misty manages to heal Kyle's deep scars, and Zoe decides to take him to his grieving mother. However, after she leaves, the unexpected happens. The boy who was brought back to life by the witches not only doesn't talk, but also behaves aggressively. After his mother's harassment, Kyle kills the woman and escapes, and soon Zoe finds him. The girl decides to bring him to the academy to always keep an eye on him. She has trembling feelings for him, as he is the only one she can have intimacy with since he is essentially dead. Soon Madison begins to feel attracted to the guy as well, and the witches decide to share him for two. After a while, however, Fiona accidentally kills Madison and asks the butler to get rid of the body. A council of witches arrives at the academy to investigate Madison's disappearance. However, the Supreme Witch manages to outwit everyone and avoid punishment. After a while, Cordelia is attacked by an unknown man in a robe and pours acid on the girl. As a result, the witch loses her sight, and Fiona sees this as an opportunity to get rid of the council and its leader Myrtle. As a result, she accuses her and burns her at the stake. However, the burnt corpse is found by Misty. She resurrects the witch and brings her to her house, where they are attacked by a witch hunter. So Misty has to ask Cordelia for shelter. Meanwhile, Zoe decides to find out where Madison has gone and uses a Ouija board. But in the end, she gets in touch with the spirit of a murderer nicknamed Axeman, who was killed years ago by another coven. He clues Zoe in that her friend's body is upstairs, and in exchange for the information asks for release. So the Zoe finds Madison's corpse and, with the help of Misty's gift, resurrects her friend. Cordelia loses her sight, but gains the gift of clairvoyance in return. Touching Madison, she learns that it was Fiona who killed her. Together with the coven, the Cordelia decides to execute her mother in order to appoint a worthy Supreme Witch. But the woman is warned about their plan by the butler. Meanwhile, the resurrected Myrtle considers Cordelia her daughter, so she wants to return her sight at any cost. She kills her colleagues and gives their eyes to Cordelia. Soon the already sighted witch is visited by her husband, who, as it turns out, is a hunter and is in alliance with Madame Laveau. However, the girl has learned of his treason, so from now on she wants nothing to do with him. Now that she can see again, the gift of clairvoyance is gone. Realizing that a fierce struggle for life is coming, she decides to return this power, so she pokes out her own eyes. Meanwhile, the witch hunters begin to raid and kill all of Laveau's companions, thus forcing her to come to the home of her enemy, Fiona. This is how the Supreme learns the secret of her immortality. It turns out that many years ago she made a deal with a powerful god who gave her youth and strength in return for the annual fulfillment of his request. So year after year, Laveau steals babies and sacrifices them. Fiona is not afraid of such a fate, so she also decides to make a deal, but at the last moment, it turns out that she has no soul, and therefore she has nothing to offer in exchange for immortality. To beat the deity and keep the baby, Laveau and Fiona decide to sacrifice another innocent soul and drown Nan in the bathtub. Soon the witch hunters meet with the Supreme and Madame Laveau, who supposedly want to make peace. It turns out that it was they who poured acid on Cordelia, so that the girl began to need her husband, the son of the chief hunter. However, the situation got out of control, and the Cordelia learned about the dark past of her lover. During the meeting, the Axeman, on Fiona's orders, kills all the hunters. Meanwhile, the struggle for the title of Supreme Witch begins to take new turns. So Madison decides to get rid of her rival and lures Misty into a trap. She locks her in a coffin and bricked her up in the wall. However, after a while, the other girls manage to realize what really happened and free Misty. Soon Madame Lalaurie and Laveau die and go to their own hell, where now a voodoo witch is tormenting Lalaurie and her children. At this point, a blood-covered Axeman bursts into the academy and tries to kill the witches, but Cordelia realizes that he has her mother's blood on him. In the maniac's flashbacks, she sees him kill Fiona after she wanted to leave him. The coven ends up repeating the same old story and stabs the Axeman to death, sealing him forever. Now that the Supreme is dead, the young apprentices will have to pass the 7 Wonders test, after which the name of the new ruler will be revealed. Everyone manages to cope with telekinesis, but the journey to hell turns to death for Misty. At the next stage, the girls undergo transmutation. The witches fool around, as a result of which Zoe accidentally impales herself on a metal fence and dies. Cordelia asks Madison to resurrect her friend, but she refuses because she doesn't need a rival. Myrtle convinces Cordelia to take part in the battle for the title of High Witch. Otherwise, if Madison wins, she will be a much worse leader than Fiona was. Cordelia agrees and easily passes the divination stage, but Madison fails the test. The girl ends up threatening the coven to tell the reporters everything, thus destroying every single one of them. She goes back to her room and starts parking, and at this time Kyle comes to her. The guy is angry as Madison refused to resurrect Zoe. In revenge for the death of his beloved, the guy kills the movie star while Cordelia manages to resurrect Zoe. Fiona's daughter becomes a supreme witch and her sight returns to her. The first thing after her appointment, Cordelia decides to tell the world the truth about the existence of witches. She gives interviews for television, urging young witches not to be afraid of their abilities and seek help from the coven. Myrtle is proud of her ward, but, not wanting to harm her, asks her once again to burn her at the stake. Cordelia resists her decision, but in the end is forced to listen to her and together with Queenie and Zoe burns Myrtle. In a few days, a long line of young talents lined up outside the academy who could now not hide their identity and coexist peacefully in the human world. The new Supreme is happy about such changes in society. She offers the heroines to become part of her council and the girls agree. Soon the head of the academy meets her mother, whom everyone thought was dead. Fiona tells her the truth about her plan, because now that the cancer is in its final stages, she has nothing to lose. It turns out that she implanted Axeman with false memories of her death in order to deceive her daughter and everyone else. The plan was for her to sit in the shadows while the election for a new High Witch was underway, and at the moment when the title was already awarded, she would return and kill the new head of the clan, thus regaining her power and strength. However, things didn't go according to plan, as her own daughter became her successor. Not daring to kill Cordelia, Fiona dies and falls into her own hell with the Axeman. This is the end of the 3rd season.
Elsa founded her freak circus in Florida, but it was not very popular, and too few people came to the concerts. Then the woman decided to make changes in the program and found conjoined sisters Beth and Dot. The girls have one body, one pair of arms and legs, but 2 heads, hearts, and spines. Elsa is convinced that the 2-headed girls will be the highlight of her show, so she persuades them to join the troupe. Meanwhile, it turns out that they killed their own mother, so laying low in the freak circus would be a good idea. Soon they meet other freaks, the bearded woman Ethel, her claw-handed son Jimmy, and other guys. Time passes, and Elsa prepares a new program for the performance. But during the preparation, not everything turns out smoothly, because the new members of the troupe in the person of Dot and Beth want to get a special role in her show. After a while, a detective comes to their tent and calls them monsters, showing his contempt for every person with congenital features and anomalies. Jimmy decides to stand up for the girls, but eventually the situation gets out of control and he kills the detective. Soon the local rich man Gloria and her son Dandy come to the show. The man looks at the freaks with delight and asks Elsa to sell him sisters. However, the woman refuses him, and then the guy visits Jimmy, trying to convince him to take him in the show. But even here he receives a refusal and then falls into a rage, which decides to subdue his mother. It turns out that recently she met a clown who has been killing innocent people for several years. The woman doesn't know about it, but makes him something of a pet, who ends up running away from Dandy anyway. However, he finds him and learns about the clown's manic tendencies, after which he decides to join him and starts imitating the killer. Elsa is visited by a married couple, Dell and Desiree, who have a breast abnormality. The family asks to join the troupe, and Elsa agrees to take them in. In addition, it turns out that Dell is the biological father of Jimmy, but the guy himself does not know it yet. Many years ago, he had a relationship with Ethel. But when he saw claws instead of hands on his son, he wanted to kill him, but decided to just leave the family. Meanwhile, a couple of scammers, Stanley and Maggie, show up at one of the museums with exclusive exhibits. Under the guise of a Yeti cub, they try to sell a goat embryo. But the museum keeper quickly reveals their fraud, but does not drive them away and offers them a deal. If they can find something really valuable, she won't ask too many questions and will pay them for their work. Then Stanley sends Maggie to Elsa's freak show to take new exhibits from there, killing circus performers. The plan works and the girl is taken into their troupe. Meanwhile, the conjoined sisters Beth and Dot offer to prepare another performance and play it on Halloween. But everything is not so simple because there is a legend about Mr. Mordrake. It turns out that this man lived in the last century and was quite talented, but had one feature that could not be accepted by the public. He had another face on the back of his head, which sometimes forced him to do terrible things. Mordrake tried to get rid of it in many ways, but all his attempts were in vain. Eventually, he joined the freak circus to take his place among his kind, but at one point he killed the entire crew. Since then, there is a belief that whoever performs any role on Halloween will attract the spirit of Mordrake, who will kill them all. Soon Maggie asks Jimmy to take her to the nearest phone booth so that she can contact a relative and assure her safety. The boy agrees, but does not yet know that she is actually calling Stanley and reporting to him the situation in the circus. Returning home, the couple have to abandon their vehicle and hide in the woods. Because of the murders of the maniac in the city, a curfew has been imposed, and the police are constantly patrolling the roads. Suddenly, they notice a clown dragging a girl into the woods and decide to help her, but end up getting trapped. Jimmy manages to create a distraction, and in the meantime, Maggie and the rest of the prisoners escape. Meanwhile, the circus did have a Halloween performance. Mr. Mordrake and the ghosts of his troupe show up at the freak show. He listens to the story of everyone he visits, trying to figure out the darkest soul and take it with him. That's how he finds Elsa, who tells him about her past. It turns out that a long time ago she was a prostitute who once had her legs cut off by customers with a chainsaw, in addition to filming the spectacle on camera. As a result, the video quickly spread, and with it her shame. She was rescued that day by one of her clients, who nursed her back to health for a long time and soon had prosthetic legs made. Mordrake finds her story horrific, and at the command of the face in the back of his head, he is about to take her life. But at the last moment chooses another victim, so he ends up in the woods where the clown is holding Jimmy. The maniac tells his story, trying to explain how he became like this. He used to delight kids with his performances, but he had bad luck with his co-workers. One day they decided to make fun of him so much that in the end the clown tried to kill himself, but the bullet went through, disfiguring his face but saving his life. So he got the idea to free children from their parents, who were always telling them what to do. He ended up killing the children's relatives and taking the kids into the woods to perform. Mordrake decides that it is the clown, not Elsa, who should go with him today and kills him. Soon Maggie's sidekick, named Stanley, shows up and tells Elsa that conjoined sisters would look good on his show in Hollywood. The woman doesn't show any sign of being upset, but soon decides to take Beth and Dot to Dandy, who has his eye on them. Meanwhile, she informs everyone else that the girls just took off and ran away. But Jimmy doesn't believe her and goes on a search, after which he returns the sisters to the troupe. However, the girls protect Elsa, and in return ask her for a substantial sum of money, which should be enough for the operation to separate them. Elsa tells Stanley about a conversation with Beth and Dot, and the man suggests that she get rid of them. At this time, Ethel overhears them and decides to kill her longtime friend, but Elsa throws a knife at her and fakes suicide with a Stanley. Meanwhile, he learns that Dell has a non-standard orientation and threatens to tell the troupe about everything. Fearing publicity, the man agrees to fulfill his request and kill some freak. The choice falls on the world's smallest woman. He steals her and chokes to death, after which her body is sent to a museum of deformities. After a while, Dandy kills his mother and goes in search of more victims. He bribes a local detective and puts Jimmy behind bars for his evil deeds. Soon Stanley comes to him and tells about a lawyer who can help him, but he will have to pay a huge sum. So the guy has no money, but he has claws that can be sold profitably. Stanley offers him help in this difficult case, and the guy agrees. Meanwhile, Maggie begins to feel guilty because she fell in love with Jimmy, who was taken away by detectives. She decides to reveal the truth about her partner to Desiree and brings her to the museum where she sees the boyfriend's claws. That's how everyone finds out that Stanley has been lying to everyone, and eventually Jimmy does end up behind bars. Then the freaks come up with a plan to intercept and free the guy. However, now the Jimmy without two hands cannot take care of himself and rejects Maggie's help. Because of her, his buddies died. The troupe presents Stanley with a gift in the form of the severed head of the museum keeper, after which they all attack and brutally torture him. However, the revenge does not end there, because the troupe begin to realize that Ethel could not have killed herself, and behind her death, most likely, is Elsa. Beth and Dot decide to give the last good advice to Elsa and ask her to leave as far away as possible, which she does, but before leaving she sells the rights of ownership of the circus to the psychopath Dandy. The guy decides to make himself the highlight of the program, but when he finds out that no one buys tickets for his show, he gets mad. As a result, he takes a gun and kills almost all the freaks who get under his hand. Only Beth and Dottie doesn't dare to kill, as he has tender feelings for them. In the end, he marries the sisters, unaware of their true intentions. It turns out that they slipped something into his drink, causing his mind to cloud. That's when Jimmy and Desiree show up. The trio grabs the psychopath and brings him back to the circus, having immersed Dandy in a large container of water. The protagonists watch his slow death. Meanwhile, Elsa arrives in Hollywood and miraculously meets a junior casting assistant. As a result, she marries him and her career takes off. Soon she is offered to perform on Halloween, which she flatly refuses to do because of the ghost of Mr. Mordrake, which, of course, she does not tell her superiors. But the challenges don't end there either. It turns out that her management has gotten access to one old video of her as a prostitute lying in pools of her own blood because of her severed legs. Not giving the video publicity will not work, which means her career is about to end. It also became known about the bloody massacre at the freak show circus she once headed. Elsa didn't know about it, so she was as surprised as anyone else, realizing that her glory days are numbered. The woman begins to think about missed opportunities and female happiness, from which she turned away because of the desire to become famous. Now that everything that was once dear to her is gone, the Elsa agrees to go on stage on Halloween. She takes this step consciously because she wants to summon Mr. Mordrake to kill her and take her with him. The plan works, but the ghost does not make her part of his dead troupe, but sends her to her own circus. So Elsa returns home, where all her loved ones, including Ethel, hold no grudge against her. Meanwhile, survivor Desiree is married and happy with her lover. Jimmy lives with Beth and Dot, and soon there will be an addition to their family. This is the end of the season 4.
Detective John investigates a series of brutal murders. He finds naked lovers who were nailed to each other by a maniac, and the man's eyes and tongue were torn out. While the protagonist is trying to find at least some evidence, he receives a phone call from an unknown person who says that it was he who killed them and is now in the gloomy Hotel Cortez. The man immediately goes to the specified address, but in the room finds no one, and after a while he gets a vision of his son Holden, who disappeared a few years ago. Sometime later, John receives a message from his wife with an address where she asks him to come and help her, except that in the specified house, he does not find Alex, but sees only 2 disemboweled corpses. Realizing that he and his family are in danger, John decides to leave home for a while and settles in Cortez. Meanwhile, the Countess and her boyfriend Donovan find a couple in love and drag them to their room for a little fun. However, during foreplay, the protagonists kill their guests and drink their blood. Soon a new hotel owner named Will shows up, and the Countess takes his son to a secret room where young children live, including the kidnapped Holden, the detective's son. There, their blood is drained out of them. Meanwhile, John meets a local regular named Sally in the hotel lobby. Years ago, she was a drug addict who came to this hotel with Donovan. Then the guy died of an overdose, and his distraught mother Iris threw her out the window. Since then, she's been a ghost, forced to spend eternity inside the hotel walls. John, of course, does not know the whole truth about Sally and sees her only as an acquaintance to whom he simply tells about his life over a glass of alcohol. The next day, Will holds a fashion show at the hotel, where model Tristan participates in one of the fashion shows. The Countess immediately spots him and soon decides to infect him with an ancient virus that runs in her blood as well. Now he is a vampire and her new boyfriend. Donovan does not like it because he is in love with his creator, but his mother Iris, who works at the front desk as administrator, is delighted with the news. John's daughter Scarlett also comes to the fashion show, and together with the new owner's son, she wanders around the hotel and finds glass coffins, in one of which her brother is sleeping. Not believing her eyes, the girl decides not to tell her parents yet, and the next day once again returns to Cortez. This time she manages to talk to Holden, but his behavior seems strange to her. Scarlett tells the happy news to her father and mother, but they think it is foolish because the boy disappeared many years ago and is unlikely to be alive. After a series of strange visions, John tries to find out about this place from Iris, who tells him the history of Cortez from the day it was founded. It turns out that in the mid-20th of the last century, local millionaire Mr. March decided to build a hotel. However, being a brutal killer, the man, during the construction, provided in the building a number of secret passages and secret rooms, as well as corridors that do not lead to the exit, so that the victim could not escape. Years later, police discovered Mr. March's handkerchief at one of the crime scenes and paid a visit to the hotel. Realizing that his evil deeds were about to be discovered, the millionaire decided to kill himself. And with him went out of life and his devoted maid, Miss Evers. Since then, spirits have been roaming the hotel and killing everyone who displeases them. John doesn't believe Iris's words, so he just leaves. Donovan once again rejects Mother Iris and declares that it would be better if she killed herself. The distraught woman shares her suffering with Sally, and the girl agrees to help her part with her life. She injects her with some kind of substance, but at the last moment, her son comes running in and turns her into a vampire. Meanwhile, Alex comes to John and brings divorce papers. In the years they have been together, she has never been able to come to terms with the disappearance of her son, so she doesn't want to be together with her husband anymore. Before leaving the hotel, the protagonist sees Holden and immediately takes him home. But soon, she realizes that something is obviously wrong with the child. The fact is that he killed a pet and drank its blood. Alex returns to Cortez with her son and meets the Countess, who offers her the greatest gift of immortality in exchange for unconditional obedience. Since she has always had a special bond with Holden that she never had with John or Scarlett, Alex agrees and turns into a vampire. It's Devil's Night, where the greatest killers of the 20th century come together to celebrate their atrocities. So John finds himself invited to this celebration, where he sees the faces of all the killers who have been trumpeted in the news for decades. After small talk, ghosts of maniacs decided to kill another poor man, and at that moment, John passes out. When he wakes up, the protagonist sees the guest Sally in front of him, who assures him that nothing of the kind happened, and the dinner with the killers was a dream. Newly minted vampire, Alex decides to help a child, Max, who is dying of measles, by turning him seconds before his death. However, the protagonist did not think what consequences her deed would have. The fact is that the recovered boy turned half of his class, and together with his friends killed teachers and parents. Soon the children began to kill everyone who gets in their way, because the thirst for blood every day became stronger and stronger. After a while, the Countess finds out about it and gives Alex an ultimatum. Either she will deal with the children or the Countess will have to do it herself, but in this case, Alex will die too. Meanwhile, Iris is also trying to get used to her new state, but she has not yet come to the point of killing people. However, when a couple of arrogant hipsters move into the hotel, the main character's nerves give out. She kills the disgruntled tenants and feeds on their blood. Hotel barmaid Liz and Tristan fall in love with each other, but because of the Countess, they cannot be together. Liz decides to talk to her benefactress, but she kills Tristan for betraying her. Meanwhile, Will, as the new owner of the hotel, checks the layout of the building with the documentation and finds some discrepancies. As a result, the builders demolish the steel wall that was not taken into account, but they do not know yet that Valentino and Natasha were vampires hiding behind this wall. In 1925, the Countess met Valentino on the set of another movie, and between them immediately erupted passion. Together with Natasha, couple often spent time together, but soon it became known that Valentino died. The Countess was hard to bear this news, and in order not to finally go crazy, decided to marry Mr. March, the creator of the hotel. Not that she did not prevent her husband from killing people, but on the contrary supported his craving for cruelty and bloodshed. After a while, the protagonist learned that Valentino purposely faked his death because he and Natasha acquired something priceless: immortality. So from now on, he could not appear on the screens because sooner or later people would notice that he does not age. Then the couple offered the Countess to leave with them, but at the appointed time, they never came. For a long time, the protagonist thought that she was abandoned and only now learned that her husband, Mr. March, simply walled them up in the hotel, condemning them to eternal torment. At this time, John, who from now on is tormented by visions that have no rational explanation, continues to investigate a series of murders. Having analyzed each case, the protagonist guesses that someone kills people, choosing victims according to the principle of the 10 Commandments. To find out more, he specially lays down in a psychiatric hospital to find the alleged killer, but instead, he finds a girl, Ren. She informs the detective that the real killer has been living in Cortez all this time, and then she jumps in front of a car and dies on purpose. John returns to the hotel, where he is met by Sally, who takes the protagonist to a secret room built by Mr. March. John sees flasks inscribed with the 10 Commandments, each containing some sort of human organ. It turns out that John himself was the serial killer, and he doesn't remember it only because he suppresses his memories himself. Sally recounts the detective's first appearance at the hotel. The case was several years ago. Then he met the ghost of March, who, talking to him, realized that it was John who was worthy of becoming his follower and killing people. To push the protagonist to the first step, March incited the Countess to steal Holden, thus creating a deep wound on John's heart, which became the trigger for a series of murders. The Countess wants to reconnect with Valentino, but to do so, she needs to marry Will as soon as possible and kill him in order to inherit the hotel. The plan works, but here Donovan kills her lover Valentino. When the Countess comes to him to get even, Liz and Iris burst into the room, intending to kill the owner and start running the hotel on their own. Except that they can't kill the Countess because she is covered by Donovan, who soon dies. Now that the Countess has nothing to keep her in the hotel, she gathers her things and leaves. But in the elevator, she is met by John and killed as the last victim of the 10 Commandments. So the Countess becomes a ghost, forever imprisoned within the walls of the hotel, and Mr. March's ultimate dream of being reunited with his wife comes true. Now that they are both ghosts, the founder of the Cortez forgives his wife for turning him into the police that day. But it turns out that it wasn't her, but the devoted maid Miss Evers, who is desperate for his recognition. Now that Will and the Countess have become ghosts, the hotel is run by Iris and Liz. They are trying to do everything possible to make these walls again appeared tenants, but only the ghosts of Sally and will constantly kill visitors. Then the main characters decide to hold a general meeting and convincingly ask the ghosts not to kill people anymore, because otherwise the hotel can be demolished and it is not known where the ghosts will go then. Iris gives Sally a phone and opens the world of social networks and virtual communication for her, and Liz helps Will to realize that even being dead, he can keep his business and increase his capital. The ideas of the main characters work, and no one else tries to kill visitors. After a while, Liz learns about cancer and realizes that very soon she will die. Not wanting to part with her loved ones, she asks the ghosts of the hotel to kill her in order to stay in Cortez forever. They agree, and the Countess kills Liz. Meanwhile, the ghost of Detective John, who psychic Billy Dean is looking for, appears in the hotel. In an interview, the man talks about how he died. It turns out that after he left the hotel with Holden and Alex, life became a little more complicated because they constantly needed blood. To keep Scarlett safe, her parents sent her to a good residential school. So, during one of the raids, when John was getting blood for his family, the police killed him. But since he did not die within the walls of the hotel, he could not remain the ghost of Cortez. Now only on the night of the devil he can appear here. To make sure the psychic doesn't show up at the hotel again, John brings her to dinner with the ghosts of serial killers, thus demonstrating a very real threat to her life, in case she does continue to search for answers. This is the end of the season 5. Married couple Shelby and Matt are interviewed for a documentary TV show in which they recall all the horrors of life in the Roanoke house, and they are played in this documentary by other actors. It all started with a quiet evening when unknown people attacked Matt, because of which the man went to the hospital and Shelby had a nervous miscarriage. In an attempt to start from scratch, the main characters decide to move to another state, where they looked for a spacious house in the woods with a centuries-old history. On the purchase of the mansion claimed neighbors, so Matt had to offer almost double the amount so that the house still got them. Despite the change of environment, Shelby felt strange, and this house from the first moments began to scare her. But the girl did not dare to tell her husband about it. Soon, when Matt began to leave for work on business trips, Shelby began to see strange things. It all started with a rain of teeth, and then someone tried to drown her. Neither the first nor the second time the police did not believe the girl's stories, and her husband wrote everything off as stress after a failed pregnancy. The time comes for Matt to go on a business trip once again, only now he decided to prepare and installed cameras around the perimeter of the house, which he synchronized with his phone. Matt has also asked his sister Lee to come to their house and keep his wife company for the duration of his absence. Soon strange things start happening in the house again, but this time they are noticed by Lee, who is sure that Shelby is trying to attract attention to herself and convince Matt to leave the house. Lee hears strange noises and the girls head to the basement, where an old TV has a video on. The tape shows a person being confronted by a man with a pig's head. At this time, Matt sees a street camera video on his phone that clearly shows several people with torches entering a house. Being 100 kilometers away from his loved ones, Matt rushes home at full speed, while Lee and Shelby come out of the basement and notice some kind of voodoo dolls hanging all over the house. When Matt arrives, no strangers are in the house anymore. However, when asked by Shelby to leave the house, Matt decides to reply that they need to fight and not let the neighbors intimidate them. Shelby ends up getting in her car and driving off alone, and soon runs over a woman in rags. Trying to make sure the victim doesn't need help, Shelby follows the stranger into the woods, where she stumbles upon dozens of people who are sacrificing some kind of human being. Trying to escape her pursuers, the girl runs out onto the road, where she is met by Lee. So Shelby gets to the hospital, but even this time the police do not believe her, because they did not find anything in the clearing in the forest. The next day, Lee brings her daughter Flora into the house, because after the divorce the woman can very rarely see her. Soon the girl makes a friend Priscilla, whom none of the adults see. However, when the girl says that Priscilla asked to stop the bloodshed, otherwise all the inhabitants of the house will be killed, the mother has a little thought. Soon the woman's ex-husband Mason arrives, who upon hearing the story from now on forbids Lee from bringing their daughter to the house. Meanwhile, Shelby and Matt find something like a sacrificial cross in the woods, after which they manage to convince the police to put a guard on their house. During the night, Matt is suddenly awakened by a phone call from an elderly woman asking for his help. He turns his head and sees 2 nurses in his house who are abusing and killing an elderly patient. Matt calls a policeman, however the policeman finds nothing. After a while, the married couple notice the silhouette of a girl in the yard and decide to follow her. So the main characters discover a cellar, and in it a camera with a tape on which Dr. Elias, the past owner of the house, tells the story of this place. It turns out that he came here to write a book about 2 nurses who opened a nursing home in this mansion and killed pensioners, but they were not the only evil dwelling in the walls of the house. Soon Lee appears on the doorstep, having snatched Flora from school and brought her to the house. Realizing that for these actions she can go to jail, Shelby calls Mason and asks him to understand the feelings of his ex-wife. As a result, the man rides out to see them. However, at this time it becomes known that the girl disappeared without a trace, and soon her sweater is found on a tall tree. The search begins, and after a while in the woods they find a charred body tied to a pole. The victim turned out to be not Flora, but her father Mason. The tragedy does not give the spouses rest, and they decide to look at the cameras, from which they learn that Lee went out at night and was absent for 4 hours. Meanwhile, on the doorstep of the house appears Psychic Cricket, who conducts a spiritistic seance and learns about who threatens the family. It turns out that many years ago there was a colony not far from here, which was headed by Thomasina's husband, but the man had to leave his tribe for a while, and his wife was ordered to wait for him in these lands. However, the supplies began to dwindle, so one day the colony decided to rebel against Thomasina and, putting an iron muzzle on her head, threw her into the forest to her certain death. However, there she met a forest witch and accepted a gift from her. Eventually, Thomasina returned to the colony and cruelly punished all those who were displeased with her rule. She then led her people to the place on which the couple's home now stood, and to make the land hers forever, she killed the entire colony, after which she sacrificed herself as well. Since then, the Roanoke colony has roamed these lands and killed all who trespass on them. Fortunately, Flora finds herself not with Thomasina, who is nicknamed the Butcher, but with the spirit of a little girl named Priscilla. Cricket agrees to help find the girl for $25,000 and Lee gives the go-ahead, and soon she is picked up by the police on suspicion of murdering her ex-husband. The next day, Shelby is attacked by a man with a pig's head, from which she is saved by Dr. Elias with a video from the cellar. From him, the protagonists learn about a pattern of deaths that only occurs when a blood moon appears in the sky. The doctor learns about Priscilla and helps the main characters find Flora, but during the negotiations, the Butcher's men kill him and Flora escapes with the other spirits. Once close to home, the couple notices Psychic Cricket, who informs them that he knows how to help them. He goes to his home to get everything he needs, but on the highway he spots Flora and follows her into the woods. Meanwhile, the spirit of the forest witch lures Matt into the cellar, and a special intimate connection takes place between them, during which the man learns all her backstory, emotions, and feelings, but when he hears Shelby screaming, he still returns home. It turns out that at this time the first settlers surrounded the house and in front of the main characters decided to kill Flora in order to pay tribute to the land, but Priscilla helps the girl to survive. However, the colony kills the Psychic Cricket instead of her, showing the survivors that they will be next. Thinking that all is lost, the main characters descend to the basement, where they see the spirit of the first owner of the house, Edward, who decides to help them and guides them through secret tunnels into the forest. However, in the forest they are found by a family of cannibals. It turns out that for many years they have an agreement with the Butcher, according to which they supply her with people for sacrifice, and she does not attack them. So the cannibals take the family to the spirit of Thomasina, but on the way Matt manages to escape, and the main characters try to hide in the woods, but the mother cannibal finds them and breaks Shelby's leg. After that, she brings them to the house, where they are already waiting for the Butcher. After a while, a car with Lee appears, and the couple and Flora manage to escape. This is how Season 1 of My Nightmare in Roanoke ended. Let me remind you, this is the show in which the actors played, and the real spouses Shelby and Matt look like this. In the future, for your convenience, I will call the actors as well as the characters they played. On the wave of success, producer Sydney decides to shoot the continuation of the show and call there as the actors who played roles in Season 1 and the main characters from the real world. All the characters agreed to take part, but only the candidacy of the Butcher, Sydney rejected, as after the release of the show, actress went a little crazy and too into the role of his screen character. During the preparation of the house for the next shooting team, Sydney began to notice certain oddities, but because of the high ratings, producer decided not to pay attention to them. So the first person who died on the set of the second season was a man who played the first owner of the mansion. Then there is an angry actress who played the Butcher appear. She kills Sydney and his assistants. Then she tries to intimidate the rest of the show, but meets the real slaughterer and dies. Soon the girls who decided to escape into the woods are caught by a family of cannibals, but they manage to escape. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Shelby catches Matt getting intimate with the forest witch and learns that he has fallen in love with her, and that's why he came back to the cursed house. Unable to contain her emotions, the girl crushes his skull and soon slits her own throat. After a while, Another actor appears on the doorstep of the house, who, having learned about what has happened, suggests leaving this place as soon as possible. On the way, he is killed by cannibals, and the women have to flee. Meanwhile, 3 bloggers who are fanatical about the TV show arrive in the forest. They intend to find evidence of the existence of spirits in order to create good content and attract new subscribers. But in the meantime, they meet Lee in the forest, who has made a deal with the forest witch, just like Thomasina once did. Lee kills one of the bloggers, forcing the others to hide in a wagon. Here they see on the cameras that only actresses Shelby and Lee are left in the house, and the real Lee is coming to kill them. The teens warn the actresses of the danger, but they are met outside the house by the spirits of the early settlers, who sacrifice the bloggers. Meanwhile, Lee sneaks into the house, kills her actress, and drives the second victim into the cellar, seriously injuring her. In the morning, the police arrive at the house and find dozens of dead bodies and a live Lee, after which the actress Shelby comes out. The girl, wanting revenge, snatches a gun from a policeman, thereby provoking the other cops to shoot her. Some time passes, and the court hearing on Lee's case begins, because according to Flora's statements, it was her mother who killed her father in the woods. However, the court decided not to consider her daughter's testimony, and Lee was acquitted. Soon the ghost hunters decide to go to Roanoke's house to find exclusive footage, but at this time in the house appears Lee, who has learned about the disappearance of her daughter. She hopes that she will be able to find her here, and uninvited guests are advised to leave the house as soon as possible. Hunters for the paranormal decide not to listen, for which they soon pay with their lives. And Lee does find Flora. It turns out that the girl wants to become a ghost to protect Priscilla from the butcher, but Lee does not want her daughter to lose her future and die, so she decides to sacrifice herself and become a mother to Priscilla, hoping that one day Flora will be able to forgive her for killing her father. This is the end of the season 6. If you've listened all the way up here, you like what I do, so subscribe to my channel, like this video, and write some comments.
On the day of the United States presidential election, it becomes known that Trump has won. This news shocks the married couple Ellie and Ivy, because now their marriage may become invalid. Friend Tom, who is a member of the local administration, is also indignant and criticizes his wife for not voting for Clinton. The situation heats up when Ellie finds a comic book with clowns at her son Oz's room, after which she becomes hysterical. The thing is, she has a phobia of them, and the recent political news has only intensified it. The next day, Ellie and Ivy invite a new nanny for their son for an interview, because the last one, apparently, was an immigrant and disappeared after Trump was declared president. So a young girl, Winter, comes to their house, who manages to convince parents that she is the perfect candidate for Oz. The spouses hire her, but do not yet realize her terrible secrets. Soon Ellie goes to the supermarket, where she meets her fears again. The girl sees clowns everywhere who want to attack her. Trying to escape, Ellie gets into her car and calls Ivy, but at the same time she notices a clown in the rearview mirror, accidentally hits the gas and crashes into a pole. The police investigate but find no evidence that there really were clowns in the store. Meanwhile, a guy named Kai is happy about Trump's election, after which he goes to the local government with his suggestions. The guy proposes to control the people of the town through fear. However, Tom, Ellie's friend, rejects his proposal. Then Kai goes to the street and provokes a small group of immigrants, who succumb to the provocation and beat him up, at which point someone takes a video of what is happening. Ellie and Ivy go out for a romantic dinner, while Oz and Winter notice a van pulling up to the house. The boy sees the very clowns that Ellie is seeing get out of the van and enter Tom's house. Together with the babysitter, the boy sneaks to a neighbor's window and notices a group of unknown masked men brutally murdering a married couple. The police investigate again, but as in Ellie's case, find no evidence that it was murder. Soon a married couple, Meadow and Harrison, move in next door. Despite the fact that no one really knows them, Winter lets Oz go to visit them, as the shocked mothers find out. The girls are going to pick up their son, and the new owners of the house decide to get a little frisky with them. As a result, the acquaintance goes strangely, and now Ellie believes that there is clearly something wrong with these two. Meanwhile, at the butcher shop run by the main characters, the employees quarrel racially, and soon one of them is found dead. The detective is sure that behind all this is the second employee, a Latino Pedro, but Ellie does not think so. The situation becomes extremely tense, and the girl's phobias manifest themselves more acutely than ever. In addition, dead birds on the lawn and a strange van spraying some kind of gas only further intensify her paranoia. In the end, she comes up with nothing better to do than borrow a gun from her new neighbors for self-defense. After the death of an employee, Ivy has to throw all the groceries out of the shop, and to fulfill orders, she mortgages the house. Now there is twice as much work, so she goes away, leaving her wife at home with the child and the nanny. Meanwhile, Winter is sympathetic to Ellie's psychological trauma, but instead of pills, he offers her a relaxing bath and a glass of wine. Suddenly, the electricity in the house disappears, and the nanny hurriedly leaves, leaving Ellie alone with her fears. Ellie sees the clowns again, grabs Oz, takes the gun, and tries to run out into the street. But at that time, Pedro approaches their house with an errand from Ivy. In the darkness, Ellie doesn't have time to see him and accidentally kills him on the spot. This incident could not go unnoticed, so fierce activists for the equality of all races and genders immediately recognize her as a racist and a murderer. But this series of troubles does not end there, because soon it turns out that the neighbors gave Oz a guinea pig. At first, Ellie takes this gift negatively, but when she decides to keep it, something terrible happens. The family arrives home and sees the guinea pig explode in the microwave. But that's not all, because the same symbol is painted on their door that Tom's neighbor had before he died. Ellie is convinced that their new neighbors are behind it all, so she breaks into their house and threatens to kill them if they dare to come near her family again. On their way back, they find the same smiley face mark on Meadow and Harrison's house. Despite all the evidence and proof, the detective does not take any action and continues to believe that Ellie has certain mental problems. At this time, the main characters are called by their son. It turns out that on his computer opened a video that cannot be closed. So Ellie learns that a hidden camera was installed in the bathroom, and the video shows her and the nanny who helped her take a bath. Ivy sees all this, throws a tantrum, accuses her of betrayal, and then takes her son and is about to leave. But at that moment, the police appear on the street, and it turns out that Meadow has been kidnapped. Meanwhile, Crazy Kai becomes popular after a video posted on the internet. For everyone, he is a martyr who was beaten by immigrants. On the wave of such success, the guy decides to go into politics and take the now vacant seat of a counselor, because after Tom's death, no one has yet come to his post. From the memories of the main characters, certain details of the election day become clear. It turns out that Kai, in his quest for power, began to recruit people even before the election of the president. He met Harrison at the gym, after which he convinced him to kill the annoying boss. When Harrison agreed to become his follower, Kai began processing local reporter Beverly. He offered the woman an equal partnership and, after proving his abilities by killing her direct competitor, convinced Beverly to join his political cult. At the same time, Ivy learns that her wife voted not for Clinton, but for another candidate. The upset girl goes to a political rally where she meets Winter. Together they stand up for women's rights, so they decide to kidnap an ardent opponent of Clinton. They handcuff him so that the guy cannot get out and vote for Trump. But soon, on a tip from Winter, who, as it turns out, is Kai's own sister, the cult leader finds the poor guy and offers him an unusual solution. So with the help of a saw, he cuts off his arm and comes to the polling station to cast his vote for Trump. Winter then sets Ivy up with his brother. Through the firm technique of communicating with squeezed little fingers that Kai uses with all of his followers, the guy learns that Ivy actually hates his wife, and it started the day Oz gave birth. The thing is, it wasn't her who gave birth to the boy, it was Ellie. In the present, Ellie continues to suffer from paranoia and comes to see Vincent, a therapist. The man advises Ellie to go to a hospital, but she refuses. In the evening of the same day, the girl notices a strange movement in the neighbor's yard and decides to see what is going on there, so she notices a hole, and in it Meadow. Frightened, Ellie runs away, but soon notices a neighbor at her window. The woman asks for help and tells her about Kai's cult and the fact that she and Ivy are members of it. Wanting to know the truth, Ellie frees her and forces her to tell the truth. She learns that all this time Ivy has been driving her crazy on purpose. Meanwhile, Beverly and Kai have an honest-to-goodness pinky talk session, and the reporter learns the cult leader's story. It turns out that when his father became disabled, he turned into an oppressive tyrant. Eventually, his mother couldn't take it anymore and killed her husband and then herself. At that moment, his brother appeared, which, as it turned out, is a psychiatrist, Vincent, and suggested not to advertise the death of parents. They hid their bodies in the bedroom so as not to ruin their reputation and continue to receive compensation for the father's disability. It is election day for the council, at which Kai makes his speech. It turns out that there is another candidate for the position, Sally. Ellie finds out about the woman and decides to tell her everything she knows. Sally sort of believes her, but a cult shows up and kills her, and Ivy, noticing Ellie, doesn't turn her over to Kai. The next day, Meadow shows up at a rally where Kai is speaking and shoots him and others. Ellie tries to prevent a mass tragedy, but fails. Meadow kills himself and Ellie is taken away by the police, who end up putting her in a mental institution. At this point, Ellie does not yet know that Meadow's sacrifice was also part of Kai's plan. Beverly begins to realize that the situation is getting out of control, at which time the ideological feminist BB finds her. Eventually, Winter, Ivy, and Beverly team up with an elderly stranger and decide to take back women's rights by killing Kai, since the cult leader has recruited a bunch of crazy men to be his subordinates. Meanwhile, Ellie is released from the clinic and soon meets Vincent. It turns out that the man has recently learned that his brother has gone off the rails, and now he intends to help her at any cost. The girl sees this as her chance and calls Kai for dinner. She decides to make a deal with him and tells him about Vincent in exchange for the chance to get her son back. Kai agrees and soon kills his own brother. Ivy is remorseful and tries to connect with Ellie. Despite her betrayal, Ellie agrees and offers to stay together, except that Kai steals their son and, roughly speaking, uses the boy as a leverage on the main characters. In order not to harm their son, the girls leave. Ellie has prepared dinner and together with Ivy is going to have a good evening. But it turns out that all this was her plan, and she will not be able to forgive her former lover. It turns out that she poisoned her food and wine, after which she confesses to Kai that she killed Ivy. So she manages to gain the trust of the current counselor, who is now going to run for senator. Meanwhile, the feminist BB tries to kill Kai, but Ellie stops her, thus showing Kai her unconditional loyalty. Kai becomes paranoid that the FBI is listening in, so he tries to find the traitor. Suspicion falls on Winter, and he ends up killing his sister. But as it turns out, the rat was another of his followers. Soon to bypass his rival and become a senator, Kai intends to intimidate the entire city and then provide the citizens with his protection, thus increasing the level of trust of the population. In the end, he decides to kill 100 pregnant women overnight. But this mission fails because Ellie has been in cahoots with the FBI since the day she was admitted to the mental institution. So on the night the cult planned to attack the pregnant women, they were arrested by the police. 11 months have passed and Kai is in jail. Ellie has become a popular symbol of freedom and justice, so she soon decides to run for senator. And then, on the day of the debate, right during her speech, Kai, an escaped convict, bursts into the hall. He tries to kill her, but the gun, which he was supposedly given by his follower, turned out to be unloaded. In reality, it was Allie who planned the whole thing. Beverly ends up killing the guy with a shot to the head, and Ellie becomes a senator fighting for gender equality. This is the end of Season 7. Billionaire's daughter Coco together with her assistant Mallory appear in a beauty salon, where the girl should make a hairstyle famous hairdresser gallant. Suddenly an emergency message arrives on the phones of all visitors and employees. None of the people give this event much importance, but everything changes when Coco gets a call from her father and confirms the news about nuclear explosions, which will soon destroy all civilization on the planet. However, being a billionaire, the man was able to prepare for such a situation in advance and bought tickets to the bunker for all family members. However, The relatives will not have time to get to it, so only Coco will be able to survive. Coco and her assistant hurry to the airport, and on the way calls her boyfriend to warn him about the flight. However, the man does not have time for a private plane, so Coco flies to the bunker together with Mallory, the hairdresser, and his grandmother. After a while, the main characters see in the window of the airplane a nuclear explosion that destroyed the city. Soon it turns out that they are not the only ones lucky enough to survive. After the announcement of the approaching end of the world, unknown people come to the house of a simple family and inform them that one of their sons, Timothy, will be able to survive, as he is special. Without much thought, the father of the boy allows the strangers to take his son away, as he realizes that staying at home he will not have a chance for survival. Timothy is brought to an isolated place, where he gets acquainted with Emily. After a while, the guys are taken to Outpost 3, where Miss Venable and her assistant Mead are in charge of everything. The local administration tells the newcomers about the rules of the shelter, according to which intimacy and any other unauthorized actions of the inhabitants are strictly forbidden. In addition, there is also a certain separation between the elite and the servants. They belong to the first caste, so the color of their clothes is purple, while those less fortunate wear gray. So the pair joins Coco and the others who bought seats at the outpost. After a while, Venable breaks the news to the main characters. It turns out that the other shelters are no longer in contact, so she believes that the future of the entire human race depends on them from now on. Since the survivors are entrusted with such a responsibility, Venable cannot allow radiation to penetrate the outpost, so everyone is tested with a special device. So the hairdresser and another guy are under suspicion, and they are sent for special decontamination, after which Gallant is released and the other one is killed. What the survivors don't know is that the guy wasn't actually infected, and his death was just a whim of Venable, a cuckoo for power. A year and a half passes, and the food supply gradually begins to run out. That's when Michael shows up at the shelter. He is a member of a community called the Cooperative, which has set up several outposts across America, where only the best of society could buy tickets. Michael informs the residents of the shelter that several similar outposts have been destroyed by looters, and those that remain will not be able to survive for the rest of the year due to lack of food. He has come here to determine which of the survivors are worthy of a place in the sanctuary, the only protected bunker where people are not in danger. The first person the man calls for an interview is a hairdresser, where he finds out about his troubled relationship with his grandmother. Soon she decides to frame her grandson in order to get a place in the sanctuary herself. However, the grandmother soon dies at the hands of Gallant, who begins to see a man in latex from the first season of American Horror Story. Timothy and Emily, looking for answers, sneak into Michael's room and read his messages to the Cooperative. This is how they learn that Venable has set her own rules here. Timothy and Emily then decide to break the main taboo, which Mead and Venable find out about. The pair are sentenced to death, but Timothy manages to free himself and snatch a gun, after which he shoots Mead, and her wound shows wires. Meanwhile, Michael listens to Coco's story and then talks to Mallory. During the conversation, the girl wants to leave, but the man does not let her do so. Then she gets angry and somehow, in some unknown way to herself, throws Michael aside. He is surprised and immediately shows his demon power, but Mallory manages to block it and walk away. Soon Michael interviews Venable. He gives her a ghostly hope for a place in the sanctuary, but then immediately takes it away. Then, the furious woman decides that since she will not go to the only safe place on the planet, no one will go there. Together with her assistant, she poisons the apples, and all the inhabitants of the outpost die. She then goes to Michael and orders Mead to shoot him, except the assistant doesn't kill Michael, but Venable herself. When all the residents are dead, 3 persons arrive at the shelter, who turn out to be the witches from Season 3. Cordelia, along with Madison and Myrtle, revive the 3 women, among whom were Coco and Mallory. Then Michael shows up and declares that they can't win. We're taken back a few years. A school of sorcerers is looking for a guy they believe has exceptional magical abilities. That's how they find Michael. He has not yet fully realized the power he possesses, but already at the first meeting with the school board he manages to make a special impression. The administration is convinced that Michael has a unique power, thanks to which he will be able to eclipse Cordelia, pass the 7 miracles, and become the Alpha, as written in the prophecy. However, performing this ritual implies not only the consent of the Supreme Witch, but also her resignation, so the Chancellor calls the council and asks the coven to visit the sorcerer's school. Cordelia arrives at the meeting, but the Chancellor's proposal seems ridiculous and impossible to her, because in the entire history of mankind, witches and sorcerers have never been ruled by a man, as they are much weaker than women. Michael then decides to show her his power and revives Madison, who has been languishing in her own hell for nearly an eternity. He also resurrects Queenie, who died in the Hotel Cortez in Season 5, and her spirit became Mr. March's prisoner forever. Cordelia is shocked by Michael's power, as she herself has not been able to revive the girls. Then the Supreme Witch agrees to 7 miracles and cunningly convinces him to resurrect Misty, who is stuck in her own hell. Soon Cordelia is visited by a vision of the apocalypse in Michael's demonic face. She realizes that this guy's appearance could be the beginning of the end, so she asks Madison to go to the house where he was born, the murder house from Season 1. Madison discovers that Michael is the very child Constance took in to foster. However, as the years passed, his worst sides began to show. If at first he killed only animals, then he switched to humans. And one night, Michael grew 10 years older at once. Constance realized that she couldn't raise this monster, because hiding his crimes is getting harder and harder every day, so she decides to end her life by becoming a ghost in the house where Tate, Violet, and a few dozen other ghosts from the first season are forever imprisoned. From Ben, Madison learns about Michael's powers. It turns out that at first Ben tried to help, because he considered Michael his son, though not his own. However, one day he saw Michael not only kill the couple, but also destroy their souls, something Ben had never seen before. Before leaving, the Madison learns from Vivian that Michael's father is not Tate, but the devil himself. Madison has heard everything she needed to hear, and before leaving, she manages to reconcile Violet and Tate. Cordelia feels her strength beginning to leave her. She attributes this to the appearance at the witch school of Mallory, whose gift is truly unique and incredibly powerful, because she manages not only to heal wounds, but also to turn back time. But despite this gift, Mallory is not yet ready to become a supreme witch and fight Michael. Cordelia continues to look for ways to save the coven and the world from Michael's evil deeds, so the witch asks Diana for help. The new voodoo queen arranges a meeting with Papa Legba, but he asks too high a price the souls of all the witches in the coven. Cordelia can't go for it, so the deal is off. Madison meets up with an old witch acquaintance. With her help, the coven learns about Michael's plans, so it decides to strike first. So Cordelia resurrects her friend Myrtle and decides to kill the heads of the School of Witches, as well as Mead, who waited for the appearance of the Antichrist in the person of Michael and replaced his mother. The witches burn the trio of enemies. Cordelia informs Michael that he will not be able to resurrect Mead, as she has hidden her soul with a protective spell. In despair, the son of the devil wanders the streets of the city and enters a place where everyone worships Satan. Here he meets a woman who leads him to other Satanists. They all look at the Antichrist with questioning eyes, hoping that he will bring hell on earth. Except that Michael himself admits that he doesn't know what to do without Mead. Then the Satanists send Michael to a robotics company to Matt and Jeff. It turns out that they, like all millionaires of the planet, sold their souls to the devil, so they will consider it an honor to serve his son. This is how the idea of creating an android Mead is born. Soon, the Voodoo Queen helps Michael and Mead infiltrate the coven in exchange for the popularity of her TV show. The Devil's Son kills almost everyone in the academy, leaving only a few survivors. The women manage to escape, but soon Cordelia realizes that resurrecting the girls will not work, because Michael did not just kill them, he destroyed their souls. Then Myrtle remembers about a powerful spell that allows them to travel through time. It is the only way they can change the past. However, Mallory is not yet ready for such sorcery. Meanwhile, Matt and Jeff realize that Michael has delayed the end of the world too long, so they decide to help. They suggest he use his followers and entrust the apocalypse to science. So the guys give Michael a list of people who have sold their souls for riches, and suggest that it is for them to build shelters from the consequences of nuclear war. The guys also appoint their crazy secretary, Miss Venable, to run one of the outposts. Soon the Coven learns of Michael's plans and decides to erase Mallory and Coco's memory, giving them new identities. This way, the powerful witch will have time to unleash her potential. In addition, the main characters also force Matt and Jeff to vacate 4 places at Outpost 3, which will be bought out by Coco's father. The plan works and the girls get into the shelter, while Cordelia, along with Madison and Myrtle, hide in the swamp where they wait out the nuclear blasts. So the Coven comes to the outpost and resurrects the witches. Diane decides to side with Michael, as she has before. However, the resurrected Laveau kills her successor for her betrayal. Cordelia blasts the android Meade with a spell and Madison shoots Michael with a severed robot arm. However, he quickly regains consciousness and kills the witch. Mallory has to travel back in time, but she doesn't make it in time, as she is injured by Coco's boyfriend, who survived the explosion and snuck into the shelter. Cordelia tries to heal her successor's wounds, but nothing works. Then she goes to Michael and decides to end her life so that the powers of the High Witch will be passed on to Mallory. The plan works, and the girl becomes strong enough to return to Michael's childhood. She runs him over with her car outside the murder house, leaving him for dead in the road. Constance decides not to bring him into the house so his ghost won't terrorize the local spirits. So the devil's son dies, and the future changes. Mallory re-enrolls in witch school and meets her friends, who of course don't know her, because she changed the course of history. Everything seems to be back to normal. However, Mallory is worried and doubts that evil has disappeared forever. And as it turns out, her fears are not in vain. After all, Timothy and Emily do randomly get acquainted, fall in love, and start dating. And a year later, they have a son who behaves exactly like Michael. The boy kills the nanny. The house is circled by crows, and the same Satanists, led by Meade, who once came to Michael, knock on the door. This is the end of Season 8. The story begins in 1970, when a massacre occurs at Camp Redwood. A serial killer nicknamed Mr. Jingles breaks into the summer cabins and brutally murders counselors and children before cutting off his victims' ears. 14 years pass. A girl named Brooke starts taking aerobics classes where she meets Montana, Chet, Xavier, and Ray. From one of the guys, the girl learns about a killer nicknamed Night Stalker, who has already killed several people in the city. To escape from their own problems and protect themselves, the main characters decide to go to the camp as counselors and offer the new girl to go with them. Brooke refuses at first, but when Night Stalker breaks in at night, she changes her mind and goes out of town with her new friends. It turns out that the main characters decided to work at Camp Redwood, which after the massacre in the 70s was closed, but since this year has resumed work. On the way, the guys hit a man and decide to take him with them to bring him to the camp and provide first aid. Margaret meets the main characters at the summer cottages. She is the sponsor who decided to reopen the camp. The owner tells the counselors where to take the injured man, where Nurse Rita will look after him. In the evening of the same day, the main characters learn the history of this place. It turns out that on that very night of 1970, Margaret was one of the counselors. She is the only one who managed to survive, and that only because she did not even turn a blind eye when the killer cut off her ear, thinking that she was dead. Soon another camp worker, Trevor, shows up. Montana liked him right away, so he didn't resist when she asked him to swim naked in the lake. The guys are talking to each other, and Ray accidentally hurts his arm, and Brooke volunteers to help him. She tries to find bandages and some antiseptic, as she suddenly notices the corpse of the very guy they picked up on the road. The girl is horrified. She goes back and tells her buddies about everything. However, they do not believe in her story, considering Brooke too impressionable. Only the main characters do not know that the maniac Richter, also known as Mr. Jingles, escaped from the mental hospital and really came to Redwood. Brooke still finds the place strange, and after a creepy phone call, her fear only intensifies. The girl is looking for support from Montana, so she decides to tell about her failed wedding a year ago. It turns out that her fiancé was very jealous, and suspecting her and a friend of betrayal, he killed a buddy right at the altar and then took his own life. After telling this story, Brooke goes outside and eventually wanders to the pier where she is found by Night Stalker. It turns out that this killer is also in the redwoods and has come for her. But he fails to chase Brooke. Meanwhile, Xavier is found by a man named Blake, who blackmails him by forcing him to star in adult movies. Except the guy is sick of it, and he decides to offer Trevor instead. The guys approach the showers so that Blake can assess the physical data of a potential employee, and Xavier leaves at this time. Only a moment later, Mr. Jingles appears and kills Blake, after which he cuts off his ear. Margaret meets Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and learns about his troubled childhood, which most likely caused him to become a killer. The woman manages to convince Night Stalker to protect her from Mr. Jingles. In return, she'll deal with the guy Ramirez killed, and the guy suddenly resurrected. When the woman finds him in the woods, she recognizes him as a counselor from 1970. It turns out that he has become a ghost tied to the place. Meanwhile, the counselors find Blake's body without an ear and realize that Richter has indeed appeared at the camp. They decide to escape while there is still such an opportunity, except that the keys to the car and motorcycle are left in the cabins. The main characters have to split up. Rita and Brooke stay by the car. And a moment later, the nurse injects the girl with a tranquilizer so she can't escape. Turns out she's not Rita, she's Donna. She's the one who helped Mr. Jingles escape from the asylum to observe him in his so-called natural environment. The thing is, her father was also a brutal killer, and Donna wanted to understand what circumstances or reasons drive people to shed blood, hoping it would help her rid the world of violence. Meanwhile, Ray and Chet have fallen into a trap, falling into a pit of sharp stakes. Chet has hit a stick and can't get out on his own. Gradually, his condition gets worse, so Ray decides to tell why he agreed to this job. It turns out that recently, through his fault, a man died. Now he is terrified to count the days, because at any moment evidence can be found against him, and Ray will go to jail. After confession, he decides to escape alone, leaving Chet to die in the pit. Meanwhile, Trevor's group stumbles upon pranksters wearing Mr. Jingles masks and outfits. Turns out they wanted to pretend to be murderers to scare the counselors and kids. Only the joke got out of hand when the real Mr. Jingles showed up and killed the imitators. The main characters run into the woods and hide in a small cabin, where they find a bound nurse. It turns out that she is the real Rita, which means the one they know has been deceiving them. Just then, Richter appears and kills the girl. Soon the guys meet Ray in the woods, who, along with Montana, runs to the car to wait for the others. Xavier and Trevor hear Chet's screams and help him out of the hole, and then they hear Richter's keys jingling and decide to kill him by pushing him into the hole. Except it wasn't the real Mr. Jingles, but one of a trio of those impersonators, two of whom are already dead. Near the car, Montana notices footprints on the ground, but Rita and Brooke are nowhere to be found. The couple waits for their friends, but when Ramirez shows up, Ray gets scared and drives off alone. However, he fails to escape as Mr. Jingles chops off his head. At this time, it becomes known that Night Stalker and Montana are quite close. Turns out she was the one who asked him to kill Brooke, and that attack in her house was no accident. The thing is that Montana wants to avenge her for the death of his brother, because he was shot by Brooke's ex-fiancée. Xavier runs into the dining room to save the cook, when suddenly Mr. Jingles shows up. At first, he didn't intend to kill her, but when he noticed the guy under the table, he went on the attack. In the end, the killer puts Xavier in the oven and injures the cook, then leaves to look for Margaret. Soon the cook opens the oven. Xavier survives and then, at her request, puts the woman out of her misery. Meanwhile, it turns out that it wasn't actually Mr. Jingles who massacred the Redwoods 14 years ago, but Margaret. She cut off her ear on purpose to make herself look like a victim. The girl knew that Richter had been in the war and had gotten a special reputation, so no one would have doubted that he was the killer. Mr. Jingles himself also thought he was guilty. After countless tortures with electricity and various medications in the asylum, the man believed he was involved. Margaret ends up shooting Richter, and then also kills Trevor, who came running to save her. Except that while she was distracted by the guy, Mr. Jingles escaped. Brooke manages to escape from Donna, but she soon finds herself trapped and is left powerless. Montana finds her and promises to help, but actually tells Ramirez where she is so he can kill her. So Night Stalker comes to Brooke and immediately Mr. Jingles shows up. The killers start fighting and Ramirez dies, and soon resurrects like a demon, since the guy worships Satan. This phenomenon is witnessed by Donna. Meanwhile, the guys gather at the car, and Margaret pretends that Trevor was killed by Richter. The counselors return to the cabin, and the camp owner suggests going to the other side of the lake to call someone for help. Chet goes with her, not yet knowing that it was a trap and Margaret will kill him. Meanwhile, Donna arrives and tells the boys the truth that she brought Mr. Jingles to the camp. Xavier is furious because he almost burned alive in the oven because of this psychopath, so he decides to take out his anger on the pseudo-nurse. Richter finds Margaret and tries to kill her, but Xavier shoots him with a bow. The guy doesn't expect a twist, and in a moment Margaret takes his life. Brooke meets Ray and decides to sleep with him, but soon she sees his severed head and realizes that he is dead, and that she was talking to a ghost who has not yet realized that he is gone. Brooke returns to Montana's cabin and learns that she is the one who sent the Night Stalker to avenge her brother's death. The girls begin to fight with each other, and at sunrise Brooke kills her pseudo-friend. But this act, as it turned out, has witnesses. The thing is that at that very moment a bus with children arrived at the camp. Brooke is arrested, and Margaret testifies against her, saying that she killed all these people. While the police are looking into what happened, Ramirez and Richter, whom he resurrected with the help of Satan, escape. A few years later, Montana and Xavier, as camp ghosts, kill random campers, causing them to have a bad relationship with Ray and the 70s counselors. Mr. Jingles travels the country with the Night Stalker, who kills everyone indiscriminately. Eventually, Richter gets tired of this and decides to get rid of Ramirez by turning him in to the authorities. Once behind bars, the man sees a familiar face among the prisoners, Brooke. She lost the last appeal, and now the death penalty awaits her. Meanwhile, Margaret has gotten rich in real estate with a dark past. She married Trevor, who miraculously survived her attempted murder. To raise as much money as possible, Margaret decides to throw another event in the Redwoods. She is sure that the place of bloody beatings will certainly attract the attention of the sophisticated public. About the upcoming event, learns and Richter, who changed his name, went to Alaska, married, and became a father. The man receives an invitation to another massacre from Ramirez when he escapes from prison, kills his wife, and leaves him a message. Mr. Jingles hands his son over to his late lover's sister and returns to Redwood to kill Night Stalker, securing his child's future. Meanwhile, Brooke's sentence is carried out. But soon it turns out that Donna saved her by injecting her with a special medicine that imitates death. After that, the girls go to Redwood to take revenge on Margaret, who has already arrived at the camp with her husband. There, Trevor meets Montana. Over the years, his feelings for her have not disappeared, so he wants to become a ghost of this place and be with her forever. The girl pushes Trevor away, wishing him a better future than the eternal wandering of an untamed soul. Soon, Mr. Jingles returns to Redwood, where the local ghosts are not happy to see him. However, they are most concerned about a certain lady in white terrorizing them all. It turns out that this stranger is Richter's dead mother. The thing is that the history of this campground began long before the 70s. Back then, Mr. Jingles was just a kid, so he didn't keep an eye on his younger brother. The boy ended up dead, and his mother blamed him and the counselors for everything. At some point, she decided to take revenge and organized a massacre, and Richter, trying to keep himself safe, killed his own mother, making her the first ghost of the place. The meeting with the relative does not go very smoothly, because she still blames him for the death of her son. After a while, however, the woman becomes imbued with maternal love and advises Richter to kill himself in order to take revenge on Ramirez and save his boy. Mr. Jingles does so, because his resurrection in the Redwoods a few years ago was with the help of Satan, which means that if Ramirez kills him, he will immediately go to hell and will not be able to protect his son. Soon Richter is caught by local ghosts and killed by throwing him into a boat. But moments later, someone drags him into the lake. after which the man regains consciousness on the shore with his younger brother and mother. The family persuades Richter to stay with them. 30 years pass. Mr. Jingle's son named Bobby decides to come to the campground after the death of his aunt in hopes of finding his father. At the campground, he is met by Montana and Trevor. The main characters tell the guy everything that happened in 1989. It turns out that then Margaret shot Trevor outside the camp, which means that if he died, he could not become a ghost and be with Montana. So help came from nowhere. Despite the fact that Montana wanted to kill Brooke, she helped her lover reach the camp line, realizing that they can't get rid of Ramirez. The ghosts decide to kill him time after time, which they do for 30 years. While Bobby and the ghosts are talking, Ramirez manages to escape. He almost kills Bobby, but the main characters save him. Montana advises the guy to go to the clinic and find Donna, which he does. She answers the rest of the questions, including a story about Brooke. The girl died fighting Margaret, who was eventually chopped to pieces by the ghosts and thrown over the fence, though parts of that killer did make it to Redwood. Bobby thanks Donna for the truth and the money she's been sending him all this time, except it turns out she didn't. Then the main characters guess that Brooke could have survived after all and get on her trail. It turns out that that day she was helped to escape by the ghost of Ray, and then she did not want to remember all this and started her life from scratch. Bobby returns to the camp, hoping to find his father. Margaret's ghost tries to kill him, but Richter shows up and saves him. Bobby says goodbye to his uncle, grandmother, and father and leaves. This is the end of Season 9. This season is divided into 2 parts that are unrelated to each other, so I have also divided them into 2 parts in my recap as well. Screenwriter Harry, with his pregnant wife Doris and daughter Alma, comes to the small town of Provincetown. Here the family plans to spend a few months so that Harry can finish writing the script for the movie. One day Doris and her daughter go out for a walk where they accidentally bump into a suspicious man in a coat. The pale-skinned stranger follows them, so they hurriedly return home. The frightened family turns to the sheriff for help, but the police assure them that the stalker is probably an ordinary drug addict, which recently became a lot in this town. To relieve the tension and have a little fun, the couple decide to have dinner at a restaurant, but before leaving Doris becomes ill, and Harry leaves alone. Here he meets Belle and Austin, both well-known personalities in the creative world. He admires their talent, so he is greatly surprised when such famous people offer him a seat at their table. Upon returning home, Harry is attacked by the same pale man who has been stalking his wife and daughter. The stranger tries to bite his neck, but Harry manages to defend himself. He ends up killing his attacker. The sheriff arrives and asks the family not to worry about the consequences because it was probably self-defense, and the criminal was a drug addict and a thief. So, in fact, nothing terrible happened, except that the main characters themselves do not think so. This incident becomes a reason to leave, so the family is packing. At this time, Austin calls Harry and offers to meet. Unable to refuse a famous person, the writer goes to visit. After a short monologue, Austin declares that he knows how Harry can overcome the creative crisis. He holds out black pills to the writer, assuring that after them he will have a second breath. The man thinks that the capsules contain some ordinary illegal substances, so at first he refuses to take them, but in the end he still takes the bag with him. At home, Harry tries to squeeze out at least a couple of lines, but nothing comes out. At this time, his agent Ursula calls him and reminds Harry that this script is very important for his career. Otherwise, he could lose his job. Under the pressure of circumstances, he does take the black pill, and it is seen by his daughter. Soon, the family gets into the car and is about to leave as suddenly inspiration comes to Harry. He grabs his laptop and goes back into the house to write a masterpiece. A few hours later, the work was already ready, but the man does not stop there. He continues to create, forgetting about food, sleep, and loved ones. Doris finds this strange, and Alma adds credence to her suspicion. She tells her that she saw her father take some kind of pill. Harry himself is delighted with the effect. Only gradually he begins to notice certain side effects in the form of an irresistible thirst for blood. First, the man goes to the store, where he practically pounces on steaks with blood. He brings them home and juices every piece of meat and then drinks them. In his search for answers, Harry meets with Austin and learns that bloodlust is the price of greatness. If the pill is taken by a person with no talent, he ends up turning into one of the pale zombies hanging around the streets of the city. Doris notices her husband's strange behavior. She is now sure that he has really taken something. After all, when she hurt her finger, Harry lashed out at her. Meanwhile, Alma, who has been struggling for weeks to master a difficult violin part, notices her father's changes and decides to take the same pill as him. Then her skills improve markedly, and the girl begins to feel her superiority over her mother, who is apparently a rather mediocre interior designer. A little time passes and Alma also begins to feel bloodlust, so she finds a dead rabbit and drinks it in front of her terrified mother. Doris is sure that this place is bad for their family, so she asks her husband to leave the place as soon as possible. However, Harry has not yet finished his next creation, so the family stays temporarily. Also, Harry realizes that Alma has taken a pill and decides to help her. Not forbidden to drink the medicine, the man supplies her with blood, killing people along with Belle and Austin. A little time passes and Ursula informs Harry that his scripts are brilliant, so Netflix and other big companies already want to work with him. As her client's success grows, Ursula decides to come to the town to see how Harry managed to make such a step forward from a mediocre writer. Upon arrival, Ursula goes to a restaurant where she is found by local drug addict Mickey. He too has recently taken a pill against the advice of his friend Karen and has written a piece. Upon learning that Ursula is an agent, he immediately offers her a chance to read his creation. If at first the woman was skeptical of his ideas, then after reading it she realized that there was something in it. The only thing that confused her was the presence of talent in a man like Mickey. With a little pressure, she learns about the pills and the chemist who produces them. Realizing that these pills can create great creative people that she as an agent can get rich from, Ursula tries to make a deal with the chemist. But the woman does not want to cooperate with the stranger. The chemist herself came to town 5 years ago. Previously, she worked on a project to create the perfect soldiers, but then decided to go free sailing and discover a formula that can enhance the talents of gifted people. That's when she met Mickey, offering him the chance to become great. Except that the drug addict then did not need fame but only money, so for a certain fee he brought to her all comers. That's how Belle and Austin became one of the first. Meanwhile, Doris gives birth to a son and soon returns home. The woman realizes that they are still in the city and asks her husband to leave the place as soon as possible. Harry assures his wife that they will talk about it in a couple of weeks, when her body has recovered from childbirth. At night, Doris sees Alma drinking the blood of her newborn son. And in the morning, everyone pretends that she had a nightmare and nothing like that happened. Alma doesn't understand why she and her father need Doris, since she is a mediocre woman with no obvious talents and they are great. Despite the fact that Harry agrees with her, he asks his daughter to stop thinking like that. But the girl doesn't stop. Alma convinces her mother that she is special, and Doris ends up taking the pill. Except that the miracle doesn't happen to her like it did to Harry and Alma. She becomes one of the pale zombies. Harry realizes that his daughter did it, but there's nothing he can do about it now. He ends up releasing her outside to the rest of the zombies. Meanwhile, Karen wants to protect Harry's baby because Belle is going to eat him. She asks Mickey for help in kidnapping the baby. However, the situation spirals out of control when the pale ones show up. Mickey asks her friend to take a pill and become like him, as she definitely has talent as an artist, and zombies don't bite them. Karen, on the other hand, is determined to keep her soul and is unwilling to glorify her ego at the cost of other people's lives. However, when the pale ones surround her, Karen does take a pill and they retreat. Soon, along with a friend, they head to the shore for her to paint a masterpiece. Except Karen wants to purify both herself and Mickey, so she kills him and then herself. Soon the corpse of the sheriff whom Alma killed surfaces. An investigation begins. Chemist doesn't like this kind of interest in the town, so conspiring with Ursula, she comes up with a plan. Belle steals Harry's baby, forcing the entire family to come rescue him. And when the plan works, Ursula convinces the pale ones to attack their own kind. Then, when they kill Belle and Austin, she shoots the zombies as well. Everything seemed to end well, but at the last moment Alma kills her father, as he wanted to stop taking the pills. Now the girl, along with the chemist and Ursula, is enjoying her greatness. The trio distributes the pills en masse, provoking worldwide chaos and bloodshed. This is the end of part 1. In 1954, President Eisenhower is sent to the desert where an unusual airplane has gone down. After inspecting the craft, they discover a woman named Amelia. The last thing she remembers is the plane's controls malfunctioning and someone unknown implanting something in her. The story is strange as it is, but Eisenhower is also frightened by the fact that this woman has been missing for 20 years, which means that she should have aged long ago, but she is still as young as ever. After some time, the alien comes into contact with the president and puts forward conditions. In exchange for modern technologies of the future, he will have to sign a treaty with the aliens, according to which he allows them to conduct experiments on Americans. The president does not want to agree, because it could be the beginning of the end. His wife Mamie thinks otherwise. She believes that it will be a step forward, allowing them to overtake the Soviet Union in the development of technology and society. Realizing that her husband does not share her point of view, the woman decides to talk to the vice president, which Eisenhower soon learns about. He asks his wife to explain why she is leaking classified information, calling for a questionable agreement. And then it turns out that an alien is sitting inside Mamie. Now, in order for the woman to survive, the president has to agree to the alien's terms. In the present day, 4 friends decide to go on vacation with tents. But at some point they realize that the lake they were looking for has disappeared, and instead a field with dozens of cows cut in half is in front of them. Troy, Cal, Kendall, and Jamie leave the desert in a hurry. But soon the car stops, and an unknown object lights up on it. After a moment, the auto does start, but the guys notice that Jamie has disappeared, and it soon turns out that she was outside. Eventually, the friends get her into the car and return home. The next day, everyone has the same symptoms: nausea, malaise, and more. It turns out that all 4 are pregnant. Realizing that this is impossible, the main characters go to the ultrasound. But what the gynecologist sees leads her to horror. The woman tries to contact a colleague, and at this time people in black suits appear, kill her, and the pregnant 4 are taken to a special place. In 1954, Eisenhower is forced to deal with the consequences of his decision. Cases of missing people, among them children, are recorded all over America. Soon the aliens send a messenger, Thor, who presents people with a pocket computer. Sometime later, Eisenhower discovers a bunker under the White House with hybrid babies. It turns out the aliens are trying to save their species from extinction in this way. Eisenhower decides to redirect their experiments elsewhere to Area 51. A couple of years pass, and the presidency is taken over by Johnson, whom Eisenhower also initiates into the agreement with the aliens. The story is brought back to the present day. Once in Area 51, Troy, Cal, Kendall, and Jamie meet Calico, who tells her story and the history of this place. It turns out that no one here ages a day, and every year gives birth to 2 or 3 hybrids to the aliens. The same fate is destined for the main characters. Troy starts to panic and is taken to a room like an operating room. He doesn't understand how, as a man, he can even give birth. However, the adult hybrid Titha helps him through his mission. She cuts open his belly and pulls out a baby. But by some criteria, he is not a match for them, so the baby is killed. Troy returns to his friends and decides to protect Cal's unborn child at all costs. He takes the guy to a safe place and cuts his belly open. Another hybrid is born, but it is different from humans, so it immediately kills both Cal and Troy. In the 70s, Eisenhower on his deathbed refuses Thor's offer of immortality, after which he dies. Mamie, on the contrary, does not want a similar fate and agrees to a gift from aliens. Having faked her own death, she arrives in Zone 51, where no one ages or dies of natural causes. Here she meets Calico, who becomes her only friend in this place. In the present day, an unauthorized murder becomes known. The guards search the area for intruders and soon find the hybrid. Titha learns that the hybrid was murdered and gives orders to shoot those responsible. Jamie and Kendall try to find their missing friends and find them dead. They are then injected with some kind of medicine and transferred to an operating room. Jamie gives birth to an imperfect hybrid who is also killed, as well as Troy's baby, and then her throat is slit as well. Soon it is Kendall's turn. She manages to give birth to the perfect creature, just the kind the aliens have been trying to breed for decades. The girl's head is cut off and in its place a metal sphere is inserted, keeping life alive in this decapitated body for cloning hybrids. Thor informs Mamie that the aliens' real plan was not only to find the perfect hybrid, but to take over a new world. Now that the perfect creature can be cloned, they will kill all humans. Mamie conspires with Calico and goes to Theta to kill the hybrid and his so-called mother, but at the last minute her friend betrays her. Thea kills Mamie and Calico becomes the spiritual mother of the perfect newborns. This is the end of Season 10. New York, 1981. Detective Patrick goes to the scene where the decapitated body of an LGBT community guy has been found. The public is on its feet because this is not the first death. But the city police don't care about the fact that people like him are dying one after another. The only one who cares is the journalist Gino. Since the man belongs to this minority, he tries his best to cover the latest events in the press so that the public will pay attention to a series of mysterious murders, thus forcing the police to look for the culprit. Soon it turns out that the reporter's boyfriend is the same Detective Patrick. He in every possible way hides his orientation from his colleagues, causing confusion in Gino. But this disagreement does not end there. The journalist wants Patrick to dedicate him to the details of the investigation, which the detective himself is not going to do. Meanwhile, a guy named Adam goes to the park to meet his buddy. But at some point he begins to suspect that something is not right here. Adam searches for his friend, but doesn't find him. Then he decides to go to the police with a missing persons report. But the officers are in no hurry to investigate the case with another man of LGBT community. Adam finds a man who is not indifferent to his problems, which becomes Gino. The main characters decide to investigate together. Soon Adam finds a picture of a big guy in a leather mask, just like the one he saw in the park when his friend disappeared. Adam decides to look for the photographer who took the picture and finds Theo. From him, he learns that the model was a man called Big Daddy, but as it turned out, he died a couple of years ago. Meanwhile, Gino comes to a bar and meets a man named Henry. He tells him about a suspicious guy who frequents the place. Gino thinks that this is the man he is looking for, but he can't find him and leaves. On the street, Gino gets sick and an unknown man pushes him into a car. It turns out that this man is the killer. He tortures Gino, and then, seeing that he also served in the army, lets him go. He assures him that the police won't look for him because they don't care about minorities. The next day, the journalist tells Adam about everything, and the guy decides to put up flyers around the city, ridiculing the police for their inaction, for which he is caught by the police. Adam has nothing to charge him for, so soon his buddy comes to pick him up and takes him to a private party where Adam meets Theo, a photographer. They decide to spend time together, and at the same time Gino persuades Patrick to stop denying his orientation and go with him to the bar in search of the killer. The man agrees, but the evening does not go according to plan when very close to them another guy is killed. And the next day the police find the next victims of the criminal, or rather their parts, in the alley. Meanwhile, outside a bar, some guy picks up a phone and gets an offer to meet from a stranger. Without thinking long, he goes to the specified address and gets into a cage. Soon he is released, and the man immediately goes to the police, but does not file a report. Patrick is obliged to check out the tip and arrives at the house at the address given. The owner turns out to be an influential man, Sam, who is partly Theo's sponsor. The man does not hide the fact that recently locked a stranger in a cage, but assures that everything was consensual. With no corpus delicti and no relevant evidence, the detective has to walk away. Just because Sam isn't the killer he's looking for doesn't mean he doesn't exist. Patrick decides to put himself on duty at the same phone in hopes of finding the culprit. A few hours later, the plan works, and Patrick follows the tip to a party. Here he is supposed to find the caller, but he meets a random guy and gives in to the impulse. Soon Adam and Theo go to a club where the guy shares his thoughts on Big Daddy. Adam is convinced that he is still alive and is the very same killer. After a while, the guys are served a cocktail from an unknown person, and then Big Daddy shows up and sets the club on fire and closes the doors. Several people die in the fire and the survivors are taken to the hospital. Adam believes there was a criminal in the club and decides to tell Gino about it. The reporter and Patrick arrive at the hospital and try to find the killer, whose portrait Gino made up from his memories. Soon he manages to find his kidnapper, who turns out to be an unremarkable Mr. Whiteley. Gino follows him through the corridors of the hospital and down to the morgue, where he is attacked by the killer. He ties Gino up and puts him in the refrigerator. Meanwhile, Patrick begins to sense something amiss and then notices Whiteley waving at him. At that moment, he realizes that he is the criminal and follows him, but he can't catch up with him. Patrick remembers about Gino and miraculously finds him in the morgue. Meanwhile, Theo breaks up with Sam after learning about his cruelty and special preferences, but this decision is helped by his feelings for Adam. The couple meet and decide to be together. Gino and Patrick's relationship becomes more complicated when the detective's ex-wife brings him a box with a similar mask to the one Big Daddy wears around town. Gino decides to talk to Patrick about it and learns of his true preferences. Moments later, Gino loses consciousness and ends up in the hospital. Along with the murders, a strange disease has appeared in the city that is unlike anything else. Adam's friend Hannah, who is a doctor, tries to find the origins of the disease in order to understand how it can be cured, but all her attempts are in vain. Soon she meets a woman who gives her a tip. According to her, it's all about a government conspiracy. The government has crossed diseases and spread it to the masses, and there is hardly anything that can be done about it. At first, Hannah did not believe in this hypothesis, but taking blood from everyone who was on the day of the fire in the club and revealing the same pathologies, the woman began to worry. Meanwhile, Mr. Whiteley kidnaps the next poor people and brings them to his warehouse, where he cuts off the body parts of his victims. It turns out that he makes one body out of them, which he wants to revive and present to the public. In this way, the man intends to draw the attention of New Yorkers to the problems of LGBT community, to which he himself belongs. The next day, Patrick receives a call from unknown people claiming to have found the remains of a man in a leather mask on the beach. The detective immediately calls Sam, whom he supposedly did not know, and states that they have a problem. Lying to Gino about an urgent job, Patrick goes to the beach with Sam, and the reporter decides to follow them. It turns out the remains belong to a young man Patrick and Sam accidentally killed a couple years ago. Then they called a mercenary Henry, who for a certain amount of money agreed to save them the trouble. He called in his assistant, which was Mr. Whiteley. He cut up the dead body, after which the young man was buried on the beach. Gino learned the whole story, and now he has two options. Either he tells everything to the police, thus exposing Patrick, or he becomes an accomplice. Realizing that he cannot give up his friend, Gino decides to keep silent. The main characters guess that it is the butcher who is behind the murders, as the cuts of the bones are identical to those that Patrick saw recently in the morgue. The journalist and Henry set up a meeting with Mr. Whiteley, while Patrick and Sam get rid of the evidence of their past. Except the meeting doesn't go according to plan. The killer guesses something is wrong, so he kidnaps Henry and brings him to the warehouse where he's been hiding his other victims. Gino tracks him down and calls Patrick, after which the pair go together to rescue Henry. In the warehouse, they find a hanging body assembled from the remains and then get hit in the head and come to their senses already tied to a table. To get out, Henry cuts off his own arm and, along with Gino, goes to rescue Patrick, whom Whiteley nearly cuts out his heart. The detective kills the criminal, and then, with a sense of accomplishment, leaves the police. Patrick, Gino, Adam, and Theo go to a private party, but they can't relax. Gino is attacked by Big Daddy and Adam miraculously manages to save him. Then Patrick appears and shoots the attacker in the head, but soon the body somehow disappears. Meanwhile, Theo is feeling sick, which his ex Sam decides to take advantage of. He drugs the photographer and hangs him in the woods. then brings Henry here to use him. However, the man is scared off by Big Daddy, and then the ghosts of the murdered men appear and embrace Theo, after which he dies. On the day of Theo's funeral, Sam loses consciousness. Then, as if transported to the future, where his deceased ex gives him a little tour of the wards where their acquaintances with AIDS lie. It turns out that he himself also has AIDS, and before he finally dies, he sees the people who shaped his lust for inflicting pain in the past. Meanwhile, Adam learns that his friend Hannah has died. Turns out the doctor was sick, just like everyone else he knew. The thing is, Adam helped her get pregnant, and supposedly that's what caused her illness. Thus began the AIDS epidemic. To prevent infection, Adam distributes leaflets around town urging people to use contraception. But it's too late. 6 years pass. Patrick's condition worsens. He has AIDS and irreversible blindness. Gino cares for him while he is transported to his past in visions. He sees his father, who as a child mocked his sexual orientation. Patrick dies next to Gino while Big Daddy stands in the room. After the funeral, Gino tries to move on with his life, but with AIDS it proves difficult to do so. Big Daddy follows him everywhere, and it turns out that everyone with severe HIV sees him. 4 years later, Gino dies. Adam attends his funeral and prepares to give the eulogy. This is the end of season 11.
A woman named Anna is an actress who, after the release of the latest movie, became especially popular. However, success in her career is not able to replace the joy of motherhood. Anna, together with her husband Dex, for a long time trying to have a child, but according to doctors, the couple has inexplicable infertility, so the only way out, artificial insemination. All would be nothing, but during the egg collection and all the time after, Anna feels something strange. It seems to her that someone is persecuting her to prevent her from having a child and ruin her life. However, Anna has no proof of the stalking, and all her words seem delusional and unlikely. Dex invites his beloved to dinner with his friends, and Anna agrees. It would seem that nothing terrible could happen, except that among her husband's close friends, there is the best friend of his late wife named Talia. The woman has forgotten her manners and talks passionately about her new acquaintance, who looks exactly like Dex's former lover, Adeline. Anna does not like the fact that her husband is in close contact with the double of the dead wife, but she cannot forbid him to see her. Soon the woman goes for an interview and sees the woman who has been stalking her in the clinic. Anna is frightened, but tries not to show any sign of it. Meanwhile, Dr. Hill calls and tells her the happy news. They manage to fertilize 2 eggs, so from the day to day it is urgent to plant her embryo. The couple arrives home, and at night, Anna suddenly wakes up and sees next to her bed a person in a black cloak who is rapidly leaving the apartment. The woman calls the police, but nothing is seen on the cameras. The officers gently hint that she's just dreaming while under medication, and Dex doesn't really believe her since there's no proof. The next day, the actress's manager Siobhan informs her that she needs to move on because she has been nominated for an award, and this is exactly what will help her career. At first, Anna refuses to be active on social media to attract fans because someone is clearly following her, but Siobhan manages to convince the woman not to give up and go all the way. Soon, Anna comes to another event, where she meets an insane fan in the restroom. In the end, the stranger behaves frighteningly, and Anna has to push her away, causing her to fall and hit her head. There is blood everywhere, and Anna is filled with fear, but she decides not to do anything about it and goes to the press. After a while, she sees the same woman among the guests as if nothing had happened. Anna makes a pre-prepared speech as she notices something strange in the hall. As a result, she begins to vomit black, and then the actress faints. Due to recent events, the couple realizes that they need to move. Only this way they can minimize the risks of pregnancy. If it really is about the stalker, it could be dangerous for Anna and the baby. Talia offers to help and gives them her house for a while, and leaves them a security guard, Kamal, who will follow Anna everywhere. The next day, Anna starts to feel sick and some unusual pain, plus a strange pimple on her chin, so she comes to the clinic to see if everything is normal with the baby. Nurse Ivy comes in and gives Anna an ultrasound. Seconds after she leaves, the woman starts bleeding. Then another memory lapse, and then Dr. Hill arrives. He gives the couple the unfortunate news that they have lost the baby. However, the news doesn't end there because Nurse Ivy, who did the ultrasound, apparently doesn't work at the clinic. Dex doesn't really believe his wife's side of the story, and Anna senses this, so the couple fight in the car. The woman decides to make her way home through the woods alone, and so she wanders into some clearing and sees an elderly woman who is everywhere she sees. The frightened actress returns home to find that not an hour has passed, but almost a whole day. But she did not feel it. Anna tells about the frightening stranger in the woods, and Dex and Kamal decide to check out the area. But as expected, they find no one. The next day, a caretaker comes to Anna and Dex's house and introduces herself as Nicolay. She will often come to them and help to take care of the mansion. After a while, Siobhan comes to visit. She could not help noticing that her client began to look strange and says crazy things. The manager tries to support Anna and takes her out for a walk, telling her about the difficulties she had to face after the miscarriage. On the beach, Anna finds a doll, and it doesn't seem ordinary to her. The thing is that they haven't made such dolls for a long time, and lately they've come to her attention too often. Anna picks her up and brings her to the basement, where she notices something in the wall. It turns out that there is a secret passage that leads her into a dark room with a chair. Anna doesn't have time to look around as someone grabs her, and then she comes to her senses in the basement and thinks she dreamed the whole thing. Soon Anna finds the corpse of an animal near the house and decides to take it home. She brings it to the basement and puts it in the crib, as if it were a baby. In parallel, the actress continues to feel the baby's movements, but it is impossible because there was a miscarriage. Realizing that the situation is not usual and the sensations are too real, Anna decides to go to the ultrasound. It turns out that she had twins, and one of them is still alive. At night, Anna can't sleep and eats an entire jar of ice cream, then goes down to the basement and tastes the blood of a dead animal, then starts eating it. The next day, Anna suggests that Dex throw a dinner party and invite his new acquaintance, the artist Sonia, to it. Her husband agrees, and in the evening the women talk about nothing, after which Anna decides to show her a picture of Dex with his wife Adeline. The thing is that the deceased spouse and the artist are identical. It's hard to believe that they never met, yet Sonia claims that she has never seen her. Anna is already heavily pregnant, so Dr. Hill forbids her to be nervous and work. Realizing that this could harm the baby, Anna is forced to withdraw from the Golden Globe Awards, and her competitor Babette is nominated instead. Anna watches the broadcast from the awards and then gets a call from Siobhan asking her what she is willing to do to win her award. The next morning, Anna learns that Babette has died unexpectedly. The woman's condition worsens. She keeps seeing things and events that others do not see. Anna tries to pretend that nothing is happening, but slowly begins to go cuckoo. The action moves to the beginning of the first millennium. A woman is unable to give birth and cuts open her stomach. This is how twin girls Sonia and Adeline are born. Then someone in a black cloak comes to the woman in labor, who turned out to be the woman who did the ultrasound in the present to Anna. The event shifts to 2013, when Dex was still married to Adeline. The woman worked at a restaurant and was clearly trying to hide her past. It turns out that Sonia is her sister, who together with Nicolay is trying to bring her back to her clan, but Adeline decided to leave everything in the past and get married. After a while, things get complicated when Adeline learns she is pregnant. She realizes what it could be risky, so she doesn't break the news even to Dex. Soon, her mother, sister, Nicolay, and another man kidnap her. This is how she learns that her best friend Talia also made a deal with the devil, which is why she managed to become so rich. Realizing that Adeline will not return to their clan, her mother cuts open her stomach and with her minions burns the woman. In the present day, Anna, along with Siobhan, arrive at another party where Anna notices the same cloak she saw the day her house was invaded. Underneath the cloak is Cora, and that's when Anna learns the ugly truth. It turns out she's her husband's lover. It was Cora who had been changing events on the calendar, driving Anna crazy, tearing up pictures, and watching everything that happened in her house on camera. The only thing she didn't do was plant dolls, and she had nothing to do with the hair loss and hallucinations either. Moreover, the Cora warns Anna that someone is doing something terrible to her child, and she should be on her guard. Anna arrives with Siobhan at the Academy Awards, but the woman goes into labor. Her manager asks what she is willing to sacrifice for fame and the desired award by putting her hand on her stomach. The implication is that it's about the baby. Anna confirms that she is willing to sacrifice even him. In the next second, Siobhan congratulates her on her win, and moments later, Anna is announced as the winner of the nomination. Afterward, the actress's water breaks on stage. Siobhan calls Dex and her husband accompanies his wife to the hospital. But on the way, it turns out that behind the wheel of the ambulance sits Ivy. Anna asks her spouse to help her deliver the baby, but when the man tries to get the baby, the infant chews off his hand. The car stops, Ivy kills Dex, and the actress finds herself in the middle of the parking lot in a circle of witches. They help her give birth and claim she traded the baby for an Oscar. Anna faints and wakes up on a bed with paralyzed legs. It turns out that Siobhan is in charge of the witches. Furthermore, she is the biological mother of the deceased Dex, so her child is special. She extracted the organ from her son so that she could continue to breed monsters. The main goal of their community is to breed powerful beings that could bring about something like the end of the world by killing all the men and returning power to the women. If Anna takes the baby in her arms, she agrees to join their clan, and as a bonus, she gets eternal youth. The woman takes the baby in her arms and sees that he is different from normal newborns. She tries to feed it, and in the meantime, the ghost of Adeline appears. She declares that only light can destroy darkness and casts a spell, which Anna picks up on. This is what kills Siobhan along with the others, and the baby in her arms disappears. After a moment, sensitivity returns to Anna's legs, and she stands up and picks up a crown of black wings, then places it on her head. The woman hears crying and finds a normal baby in a crib. Taking him in one hand and Oscar in the other, Anna just stands there, contemplating her future. This is the end of Season 12. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.